99-cent rental.
This is 99 Cent Rental. I'm your host, Brian White, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Dave White. Dave, how you doing?
Well, thank you for asking. I'm okay. You may have heard that last night I watched the Nickelodeon documentary.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, the joke in there is that this is the 8th time we've done this.
It has not been easy, this transition away from our old platform. We're trying different things out, and it's working, and sometimes it's not working. So we have to pretend like we're speaking for the first time.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, though. The real takeaway from the Nickelodeon documentary is that Nickelodeon in the 1990s and early 2000s, rich with pedophiles.
Just who knew? Who knew? You know what I would like to just be kept under wraps forever is just what the working environment around you can't do that on television was like. Just like, don't tell me. Just don't fucking tell me.
So as I was saying to you earlier, the big, all the people are on the internet, the people on the internet, those ones.
Yeah, the internet, the monolithic internet.
They're all like, everyone's like, it'll ruin your childhood. And as I told you, these are not a part of my childhood. These are sort of later shows. But I was saying last night, I was like, my childhood Nickelodeon was all Canadian shows. So I don't know. I'm not saying there aren't pedophiles in Canada. Obviously, there probably are. I'm just assuming. But I just feel like it might have been a little bit better.
Yeah, I have very, very hazy memories of like actually watching Nickelodeon when we were kids, because it was when we first caught onto it, it really was just like repurposed Canadian content.
Yeah.
And then eventually they introduced like Double Dare and shit. And I think it kind of took flight properly, but by the time that like it sort of moved into the kind of machine that it is now, or it was then, like we were just way too old for that shit.
Yeah, and that's really what the documentary is about. It's like this one dude, the fat guy from Head of the Class, he sort of like becomes this content, like this golden boy content creator, but he's such a fucking monster that like he creates such a terribly toxic environment that it prevents people from wanting to speak up for themselves, even when they're being sexually abused.
That's the worst. That's the worst.
I can't even tell you how many times I like covered my mouth and like clutched my pearls while watching this. It was rough.
Literally the fucking worst. Yeah, you know what I watched? I watched Planet of the Apes. I was just keeping it safe.
I mean, it still has Charlton Heston in it, and he sucks.
Yeah.
But it also has Roddy McDowall in it, and he's great.
He's pretty great. Yeah, Kim Hunter. It's just everybody,
That's right, Kim Hunter. I forgot.
Yeah, you just gotta have a little Dr. Zayas in your life. I mean, just make everything better. Because the
stop the Planet of the Apes. I want to get off.
you really made a monkey out of me. The movie that we're doing tonight really kind of put me in that space where I was really kind of hungry for like old Hollywood, and so like yesterday, like while I was doing all the research for this, I was watching I spent the whole day just watching like the fucking Time Machine and War of the Worlds and shit. Like it was a real warm and fuzzy day. Kind of
watched War of the Worlds. Eh?
I did, yeah.
I watched the 4K version of that a couple weeks ago, maybe. Mm-hmm. That is a nonsense, like no plot movie, but it is visually fascinating.
That's really what I like about it, because I that was one that I saw when I was quite young, and I remember just being like, this is an old movie, and I don't want to watch an old movie. And then I watched it. By the end of it, I was just fucking riveted. But
yeah, it is. I think it's 70 years old by now, and it is
from 1950. Yeah,
no, it's stunning.
53, I think.
Stunning movie. It's beautiful. All the colors that they use in it. It's incredibly innovative.
It was a super flex on Technicolor for sure. Yeah, but yeah, just that was kind of the opposite of what you did.
Yeah, no, there's much less child sexual abuse in War of the Worlds. As far as I know, I wasn't there, so
who knows?
I can't say.
No children really to speak of in that movie, so no. So, hey, it's hard to explain to someone who's never had the experience what a trip to the video store was like back in the day. The shelves were choked with absolutely bizarre crap made on tiny budgets, completely divorced from any recognizable reality, and it was the best. We intend to talk about every one of them. Just before we get into it, if you're hearing this and aren't aware of our other show, Dave and I do a horror movie podcast on the weeks and 99 Cent Rental is off called Bring Me the Axe.
That's way less sloppy than this, I promise.
Our latest episode covers Tobe Hooper's The Funhouse. And coming up next week, we'll be looking at David Cronenberg's really, really angry and super gross The Brood. Yep. If you want to keep up with us between episodes, you can find us on Instagram at Bring Me the Axe Pod, and Dave's over there at That Queerwolf.
Yes.
We're having a good time. We do all sorts of like weekly games and shit. Like we have a lot of fun. So give us a follow if you're into that sort of thing. You know, if you're into fun, if you like having a good time.
I do not. I, for one, do not.
We've also got a sweet website now at 99centrental.com. You can listen to all our past shows there and read the transcripts. And you can also contact us directly at 99centrentalpod@gmail.com with any questions, comments, or suggestions. Do let us know if there's a cheesy movie that you love and would like to hear us give it the business. Lastly, if you like what you hear, you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube now. Search us by name and subscribe if you prefer to consume your podcasts that way. And you'd be doing us a favor by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So please do that.
And tell your friends. Tell all of your friends.
Tell all of them. Just every single one of them. Just make a huge fucking announcement. Get them all together. Make it like you're going to have an intervention. And then just be like, hey, listen, there's this podcast that I like. I think you'd all really like it.
Otherwise, you're going to have to do it everywhere you go. You're going to have to like tell your mom. And then you're going to have to go tell your doctor. And then if you have a lawyer, you got to tell that guy.
It's a terribly inefficient process.
It becomes very tedious, I promise you.
Yeah. And if you listen on YouTube, do us a favor. Give the episode a like and leave a comment. We like hearing from you guys. Tonight's episode is the result of hearing from one of you guys. So
that's true.
Yeah. So I just want to get all that out of the way right at the top of the show because I'm going to give you a taste of what we're watching tonight. So here's a taste.
Speaking. I'm talking from the bedroom of Norma Desmond. Don't bother with a rewrite, man. Take this direct. Ready? As day breaks over the murder house.
Yes, you'll read the big black headlines about Norma Desmond and this Hollywood scandal. But you'll never read the true story about the rest of us who were part of it. Me, for instance. Joe Gillis, a promising young writer from Dayton, Ohio. And Betty, that nice kid I met at a Hollywood party who knew nothing about me, but knew what she wanted. Don't you love Artie?
Of course I love him. I always will. I'm just not in love with him anymore.
What happened?
You did?
Well, we should have lived happily ever after, like they do in the movies. But this was different, because this is a Hollywood story about the people who make the movies. The little ones that you never hear of, like Betty and me. The great ones like Cecil B. DeMille. All those who knew Norma Desmond, a strange woman who left her mark on all of us who crossed her path. Has it ever occurred to you that I may have a life of my own, that there may be some girl that I'm crazy about?
Who? Some car hop or dress extra?
What I'm trying to say is that I'm all wrong for you. You want a Valentino, somebody with polo ponies, a big shot.
What you're trying to say is you don't want me to love you. Say it. Say it.
Gloria Swanson, one of the great personalities of this generation in a role that comes to an actress once in a lifetime. Rising to the heights, William Holden creates a startling portrayal. And a new star is born in Sunset Boulevard, Miss Nancy Olson.
Joe? Where are you? What's this all about?
Why don't you come out and see for yourself? The address is 10,086 Sunset Boulevard.
Yes, come out to see for yourself the film that reaches a new milestone of dramatic daring. The film that every critic says is a giant among motion pictures.
So, yeah, there it is. Sunset Boulevard. Definitely not
that
really,
old deep cut.
Yeah, not really 99 cent rental material. This is a podcast really kind of dedicated to like trash and cheese and sort of weirdness, the kind of stuff that results when somebody has a good idea but not a lot of money, or maybe they've got a bad idea and not a lot of money. I mean, it doesn't really matter. This is definitely not one of those movies. This is sort of one of the greatest movies of all time. It's a true Hollywood classic.
Yeah, this one is a home run out of the gate, and it has kind of always been considered that.
Yeah. But it is a listener request, and the way that it was posed to me made me think that we could actually take this on. Sort of under the aegis of this here podcast. Because
now, if I remember correctly, and I apologize, I don't remember who the person was who wanted to hear us talk about it. But I remember they wanted it presented as a horror movie, right?
Yeah. So this was brought to my attention by Frater Aaron of the Storybook Sacred Lore Witchcraft podcast. You can follow them on Instagram at Sacred Lore Witchcraft. And they've been asking for this one for months. They've actually asked for it twice. And the original sort of pitch was like, look at this movie through the lens of a horror movie. And having watched it, and I've seen this movie numerous times over the years. Like I truly love this movie. I can sort of see that. And there's also, but it doesn't really, this isn't a Bring Me the Axe kind of horror movie, because it really skirts the line. But at the same time, in the way that we've done some pretty campy movies on this one, we've done some pretty campy movies on Bring Me the Axe. Gloria Swanson is doing a clinic on camp in this movie. And so
I will actually challenge you on that as we go on, because I don't disagree wholly, but I will challenge you a little bit on that.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. There probably won't be a lot of challenging, just because I don't make a whole lot of hay out of that. It's simply, I think that it's a qualifier that sort of puts it in the realm. Like, I think we can get away with it.
I think this is a movie that became a cult film, not in the way that other films do. Usually when we talk about cult films, it's kind of a sticky, nebulous definition. But generally, they are movies that kind of find an audience much later than they are released. This one has an audience immediately. This is a fucking huge success, and it always has been. It attracts an audience for the same reason, I think, or it sort of attracts a cult audience for the same reason I think something like Wizard of Oz does, because a particular group sees something in a character and they are attracted to that character. And in this case, much like Wizard of Oz, I think the thing that if we build a cult around something, it's a lot of gay men who really are attracted to this movie, particularly because of Gloria Swanson, because she is so huge. I mean, there are drag performances that are just like drag careers that come out of this one woman's performance. So I think it does meet, it checks some boxes in terms of cult, but it's really more people coming to it with something else in mind rather than people finding it after decades.
Yeah. That's kind of where I was going with that. The clincher for this really was, it came back into sort of my purview after a recent Midnight Mass episode where they talked about hagsploitation.
Yes, a much derided term, I suppose.
Yeah. They came up with an alternate name for it that I think is actually a lot more clever and a lot less shitty. They called it Grandma Guignol.
That's a good one. I like that.
I like that. But yeah, that Midnight Mass episode is really more about like whatever happened to Baby Jane and like who slew Auntie Rue. This one just kind of gets a mention.
And there is a lot. I mean, in the whatever happened to Baby Jane parallel is obvious. Whoever slew Auntie Rue, that's a much different scenario.
Yeah. But here, let's do some facts here. So the year was 1950. Year of our Lord.
Dateline, 1950, Hollywood, California.
Yeah, so here's some other movies that were released that year.
What if I just talk like that all the time?
I want you to do 50s radio guy voice.
I mean, I barely leave my apartment as it is. I don't talk to that many people, so it's not like anyone would know.
Just walk around your apartment doing the radio guy voice.
Yep.
Right as it stands right now, it's pretty good. So other movies that year, we've got Flying Discman from Mars came out that year.
That old classic, eh?
Yep, that chestnut, that gem of science fiction. Also that year, The Damned Don't Cry.
Jesus. These fucking names.
What a title. That's a real piece of noir. Speaking of noir, DOA also came out that year. That's a fucking great one. That's a hell of a movie. Here's my favorite one. He's a cockeyed wonder.
How are you going to call your name? Your movie that? I mean,
yeah, and rounding out 1950, Rocket Ship XM.
I love when I miss the days. I wasn't there, but I love when they would be like, the movie is called like Lady is a Hot Trollop. It says it all, I guess.
Yeah, you just got to put it all on the poster. Leaves nothing to the imagination.
Yeah.
You know exactly what you get in when you pay your quarter to sit down at the Nickelodeon.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Don't go to the Nickelodeon. I'll tell you, bad stuff happens there, especially in the late 90s.
They will touch you. So cast and crew here. All right. The director is a guy named Billy Wilder.
Yeah.
And he is one of the greats of Hollywood.
He made one of my all-time favorite movies.
He made one of my all-time favorite movies, too. This one. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but what's yours?
Double Indemnity.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's a hell of a movie. But yeah, he began as a writer in Germany, working against the popular expressionism movement with a style that favored realism. He eventually makes his way to Hollywood in the mid-30s, dodging a literal bullet as the rest of his family was murdered by the Nazis. He goes on to direct some of the highest-profile Golden Age classics, such as The Lost Weekend, Double Indemnity, this one, Stalag 17, Sabrina, Some Like It Hot, and The Apartment, among many
7-Year
others.
Itch.
Yep. I think he was making movies straight up into the 80s before he retired.
He is unfortunately a little bit of a jerk.
I'm sure a lot of these guys were, they definitely, especially.
I mean, he's no Otto Preminger, but like he's a bit of a misogynist, and you can see it in this movie.
Yeah, for sure. So the cast, we've got William Holden, who is one of the classic Hollywood leading men.
Perhaps you remember him getting hit in the face with a pie from Lucille Ball. The iconic episode of I Love Lucy where they go to Hollywood and she, I guess, spills a bunch of pies on William Holden.
Yeah, he made his mark initially in 1939's Golden Boy with Barbara Stanwyck. And he went on to star in numerous high-profile hits like Stalag 17, also by Wilder. He did The Bridge on the River Kwai, Towering Inferno, and he was Gregory Peck's replacement in The Omen 2.
He was also in Network.
That's right. Yeah.
I think Network was his last movie. He had a very unfortunate death. Hit his head.
Oh, shit. I did not know
He got drunk and fell and hit his head.
Okay, I was going to say it was probably something alcohol related.
Yeah, he was a drinker.
He was definitely into his booze. Really, the star of this movie, the true, the person who draws all the attention is Gloria Swanson, who's playing a sort of parallel of herself. Though she wasn't insane.
I think she's playing a caricature of herself, really.
Well, the thing is there's a couple of characters in this movie, and the characters sort of past their backstory follows the actor playing them. Like you're going to find that out with this next guy also. But she wasn't insane, obviously. From what I've been told, like people who met her kind of expected her to be like this because people are weird and they can't really separate fact from fiction. But she was apparently actually quite soft-spoken. And
well, that's a very weird thing because her role in this movie, the character of Norma Desmond, I mean, Gloria Swanson, her first movie was 1914.
Yeah.
So she lived it, and she comes back to do this movie. He kind of coaxes her back to do this because she left Hollywood. She was like, when the silent movies kind of switch over to talking pictures, she's kind of like, yeah, I don't know if I'm super into this. I think I'm out. And so she kind of pulls herself out, and Billy Wilder eventually kind of convinces her to come back and do this thing. And this character kind of eclipses everything she had ever done. She becomes remembered for this as though she is this person.
Yeah.
Even though she is very much not this person. She doesn't talk this way. She does not wildly gesticulate this way. Like, she's pretty soft-spoken. And then, nobody remembers the shit she did after this either, which there isn't much of it. But
no, because what ends up happening is after this is hailed as like a return. for
Yeah,
her.
this is supposed to be like a comeback of sorts, and it just doesn't really work that way.
No, what ends up happening is she starts getting offers from studios, because by this point, the studio system is very much over, so she can work for whoever the fuck she wants. But everybody keeps coming to her.
I don't know,
with
1950. I don't think the studio system's over yet.
It was really in its death
I think
throes.
by the early 60s maybe, but I think in 1950 it was still kind of worked the same way.
Yeah, but anyways, the point I'm trying to make is all the roles that are being offered to her are Norma Desmond, but like watered down. And
Right, it's the same thing that happened to Bette Davis. When they make Baby Jane, everything after that is like, oh, you should do this again. And she's kind of like, well, I got to work, I guess. So
Yeah.
and she does it, and Gloria Swanson just kind of doesn't. She is in The Killer Bees, though. You ever seen The Killer Bees? No. It's a TV movie.
Is that
TV
the one-
movie from the 70s.
Who's in it?
I can't remember who else. Well, I think Kate Jackson, maybe.
Oh, okay, because I think I've seen
And she
one
talks to the bees.
That's awesome. I've seen, I think, one Killer Bees movie, and I think it has Michael Caine in it. I can't remember which one.
Oh, that's
that
The
is.
Swarm. That movie sucks.
Yeah. But
She's also in Airport 75, and
that's
she
right.
insisted on writing all of her own lines.
yeah, she's in it with Nancy Olson, who's also in this movie.
Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, this at the time of this movie, the thing is her life obviously was not like this, like a shut-in who was like living in the past. Like, she had moved to New York, she was into radio, she was doing stage, she was doing fine. So when everything kind of bottoms out for her, she does features from time to time, but not with the frequency that she used to. She just goes back home and like continues to work in radio and stage, and like, you know, she seemed like she seemed like a pleasant person, like in the aftermath of this, but she also seemed like very much a movie star in the years leading up to it.
Yeah, she is like classic. I mean, she really, in that way that she does sort of represent Norma Desmond, in that way of like, she maintained that kind of glamour and the fantasy of it all.
Yeah.
Even though, I mean, because she had the fucking money to do it. She was a huge star. Like, her power cannot be understated.
No, there's a line in this movie a little later on where she says something like, "Without me, there wouldn't be a Paramount," and
Which is true.
There's a truth to that. Like, for
I mean,
something
she
like,
worked for, what was it called? Lasky Players?
yeah.
Paramount originally was called, I can't remember the guy's first name, but Lasky Players. And she was one of the original ones. I mean, she started Hollywood.
Yeah. So, yeah. And so, lastly, in our cast spotlight, we've got Eric von Stroheim, who's
Not an actor.
story is fucking crazy. So there is a thing there. I'll point it out when we get to it. There's a line very late in the movie where he's like, there were three sort of rising star directors. He was like, there's Cecil B. DeMille, there's D.W. Griffith, and there was Max von Meyerling, which is the name of his character in this movie. But the truth of the matter is, the rising star directors, like the spotlights, were Cecil B. DeMille, D.W. Griffith, and Max von Stroheim, because he started out as a director.
And it was the Hays Code that pretty much took him down because he just sort of refused to play along with it.
It was numerous things. So what he does is he eventually makes a movie called Greed, and it's an adaptation of the novel McTeague, but because the silent era was what it was very debauched, and studios were making so much fucking money, and they were not, I don't know how it works out, but for some reason they are not subject to taxation in California. So the amount of money just flowing into their coffers was stupid, and they would just say yes to everything. And so what ends up happening, though, is that there's a lot of hubris, and some of these guys, Cecil B. DeMille is really the only one of these guys who kind of survives and makes it into further years. But D.W. Griffith makes a movie called Intolerance, which is like a 4-hour epic that he ends up funding himself, and it completely fucking tanks him, and it ruins his career entirely.
And that's okay, because D.W. Griffith, kind of a piece of shit.
That guy.
That guy sucks.
Fuck him.
He's the reason we have this movie, but he still sucks.
Yeah, even racists at the time were like, holy shit, you're racist. Yeah. So yeah, but Stroheim was the sort of the third character in it, and he also insisted on making this movie. And when they were like, we cannot release a 10-hour fucking movie, you got to cut this down, he was like, bullshit. So a lot of that kind of went to kind of screwing him over, but also he had thoughts on labor that were sort of sympathetic toward labor, where the studios were very much all of their power comes from exploiting labor. And so all of this shit just kind of combined. And he eventually became sort of relegated to being an actor.
And I will say he's the most fascinating character in this whole movie.
When his big confession scene comes in.
Yeah, because this is a proper twist.
It's crazy. It's a great twist. Also, I want to highlight one. This is an unusual credit that we don't usually spotlight these people, but for costuming, because costuming
is this Edith Head?
This is Edith Head. And so because the costuming in this movie is so outrageous and luxurious. For Norma Desmond, it's central to her character. It probably wouldn't have come together the way that it did if it wasn't for a woman named Edith Head. Between 1948 and 1966, she was nominated every year for an Academy Award in the costuming category, and she won.
She's the Diane Warren of the silent picture era.
Yeah, basically. She won 8 times, which is more than anybody else in her category ever. Remarkably, this movie is not one of those nominations.
Which is pretty wild.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to be said for the costuming in this movie. I also think, as much as I think she is really important, I think there are 2 other people. The cinematographer, I just said his name.
Seitz, Jonathan Seitz?
Yeah, John Seitz. John Seitz, he worked with Billy Wilder a lot. And so he, I think, is the aesthetic of this movie, the visual aesthetic of this movie is pretty much 100% him. And also I think Franz Waxman's score is contributes quite a lot to this. And Franz Waxman is an interesting choice too, because he although he was not really from the silent era exactly, he is just after it though. Like, I mean, he did Dracula, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein. He did tons of library music. And so the choice to use all of these people, I mean, Seitz obviously just sort of comes along with Billy Wilder. But the choice to use Franz Waxman is really interesting because it's at a time when I think the industry as a whole is going to start to move away from these big orchestral scores, and they're going to move towards that sort of Quincy Jones, sort of smaller combo doing kind of cues rather than these big sweeping themes.
Yeah.
And to use him, I think, is very, very smart. This whole fucking movie is like one smart decision or like one kind of kismet moment after another. Like everything just falls into place.
It's a Swiss watch. Like every piece of it is moving in like perfect synchrony with everything else. It's so...
And because he chooses the right people to do absolutely everything. And even when he doesn't, I mean, we can talk about alternative casting choices in a minute, but like even when he wants other people, it's like those people say no and the right people fall into place.
Yeah, because what ends up happening is I believe that Gloria Swanson was originally the first pick, but they ran.
No, Mae West was the first pick.
Oh, see, I thought that they were like, we'll never get Gloria Swanson. Let's run it by some other people, and then they run it by.
No, it was
Gloria
Greta
Swanson.
Garbo. I think he wanted or Clara Bow. I think might have been, and I think she was just too much of a mess at that point.
Yeah.
And then I think he wanted Mae West, and Mae West was like, there's no way anybody's going to believe that I would be chasing after a man. It's like, girl, come on.
It's that
1950.
Well, it was that she was also like, I get to rewrite my own lines, boys. And they were like, no, you fucking don't. See you later.
Yeah, that would have been a mess.
Yeah. Because man, fucking Norma Desmond's lines in this movie are fucking iconic.
They are. Like, I have so many just quotes written down in my notes.
I've got several as well. But also with William Holden was kind of like somebody that they sort of fell on because like this was also
because everybody else said no.
Yeah, because this was kind of a fallow period for him. Like he'd been acting and shit.
He was still young though. Like he had done a couple movies, but he wasn't William Holden yet.
No. But he was only 32 at the time of this. But like he kind of lived in the shadow of Golden Boy for a really long time, and that was it for a movie that was made in 1950. That movie was made in 1939. So yeah, that's hard. That's hard living. But apparently
that's what would happen with a lot of these people though. Is like you would get a contract with one of the studios, and you just sort of be on call.
Yeah. And that
might never come to anything.
Yeah, right. I mean, but yeah, originally this went to Montgomery Clift, this went to Fred McMurray, and then eventually they came to William Holden.
And Fred McMurray, so originally they wanted Marlon Brando.
Right, but nobody knew who Marlon Brando was at the time, which is a strange thought.
Then he goes to Fred McMurray, and thank God, I think Fred McMurray would have been a terrible choice. I love Fred McMurray. I think he's a great actor. I think he's great in fucking everything he's ever done. I think he would have been shit in this role.
Yeah.
He's too serious. I think he would have been a little bit too old. And then they go to Montgomery Clift. Montgomery Clift, at the time, he had just made a movie. I can't remember what the title was, but he had just made a movie where he had played a guy who's sort of in a relationship with an older woman. And so he was like, I don't really want to like fall into this kind of thing. But that's sort of not really why he didn't want to do it. The real reason he didn't want to do it is because he was in real life actually in a relationship with an older woman. And he didn't want to like have this sort of like scandal come out.
Right.
And so, but I think that I think leads into this is a good segue into providing some context, because this movie, for people who don't really know, if you're not familiar with the sort of history of Hollywood or the older years of Hollywood, it's like the first half of the 20th century, Hollywood really is sort of a perfect machine that manufactures fantasy. And it does that because the studios have a fucking stranglehold on absolutely every aspect of what is coming out. So everything that they make, every part of it, from the magazines and the radios and the interviews and the fucking every appearance is so tightly controlled by the studios because there's so much money bound. You just said it. There's so much money bound up in this, and they had the ability to stomp out anything that threatened that threatened to kind of undermine that fantasy. And there's a real dark side to that shit too, because
this is
some
an industry,
real questionable people.
This is an industry that also has a significant body count.
Yeah, I mean it's some dark shit. But this movie, when it comes out in 1950. It's not the first movie to do this. I think A Star is Born does something very similar. It just doesn't do it quite in such a dark way. But this is really the first time that any filmmaker has kind of pulled back that curtain and been like, this is really what it is. Like, this is an industry that you all love, but that these are really just people. And in a lot of ways, this industry is leaving them damaged or broken when they move on. And that, I think, was really, really shocking for people.
Yeah.
So I think to understand that part, but also I think the other important thing is to understand the silent film transition in general.
Okay, yeah, because I've got a lot of thoughts on that, because the transition from the silent era to sound pictures, you would think really wouldn't matter, but
in every single way it matters.
It absolutely does, because like the style of acting is wildly different. Like some of these people like who are acting in these movies, massive movie stars, were helped by this because they were European actors who came over and really couldn't speak English very well. And so it didn't fucking matter, because all you got to do is just emote and sort of communicate through like mimicry.
Or if you had a beautiful face. Like, I mean, it's so much. Have you ever seen The Passion of Joan of Arc?
Yeah.
It is a stunning film. It is one of the most like visually stunning things I've ever seen. And she's another one who was just like, I think I'm out. I don't really want to do this anymore.
Right.
But yeah, I think that if you the first thing, I guess maybe if you're of a certain age, I don't know if it's still true, but your first experience with this would probably be Singing in the Rain, which comes a couple of years after this. And it plays it to comedic effect, but it really does show that like it's not just that people weren't, if you had a beautiful face, that really got you somewhere. But it's not like if you were a good actor, you could make the transition, or if you were a bad actor, you couldn't make the transition, because there was so much more to it than that. It was a matter of like not being used to having microphones on you at the time. And this is why we have a boom microphone, because of this transition. Because people couldn't get used to it, or not doing these like big, grandiose, sweeping gestures.
Yeah.
Because you're fucking playing it for the back rows. It's like there were people who could not adjust to that, and shit moves on, and there was no time to teach them.
Yeah, it's an entire paradigm shift, really, because silent acting is not the same. Like it's clownish in a lot of ways, because all of your movements have to be bigger, all of your facial expressions have to be bigger, because all you've got really to sort of move the story along is the occasional dialogue card. So when people were suddenly put in a situation where the story was now told through dialogue, like a lot of them just couldn't fucking do it. And by that, by the time, and so when they bowed out, they were so fucking broken from being basically like propped up by the studios and filled with cocaine and booze and diet pills that when the studio no longer needed them, they just fucking collapsed. Like,
and it is like real dark shit, like people killing themselves, people killing each other. Like Hollywood at this point in time, it's kind of a bloodbath in a really weird way. Like women like being like, he doesn't love me, so I'm going to drink mercury and I'll show him. And you see some of that in this movie, but like, that was real. And I think it was just, it speaks to that fantasy that they had all created, was like, none of this shit is real. And yet they buy into it so hard that they're like, you know, she throws herself on her fainting couch and drinks mercury. And it's like, yeah, bitch, but you're not going to fucking get up in a minute because you just drank mercury.
Yeah.
It just devastated people.
I mean, I get it. Like all of a sudden, because it really was a very sudden shift. Like I think the first sound picture is The Jazz Singer. It comes out in 1927.
Oh, boy.
But there are, I know. And the fact that they still did blackface in the Neil Diamond version in the 70s is, oh
Jesus.
God. But really, because 1927, we got our first sort of sync sound picture, but it's in The Jazz Singer, it's just a small part. The rest of the movie is a silent. But because it sounded like shit. I mean, these people were literally mic'd like they were on a stage, and it was like again, if you've ever seen Singing in the Rain, they play this for pretty great comedic effect, but it's like you'll hear like rustling as people move around because it's just rubbing against their clothes and shit. Yeah. But it was like a couple of years later, like movies have full sync sound, but they were still making silent movies into the 30s, even as like sound pictures were taking over. Like there's a movie in this one that features kind of heavily. It's is it Queen Kelly, I think is it's called? Yeah, that's the one with Gloria Swanson and made by Eric von Stroheim. Yeah, because that one was in 1932, and like Dracula was in 1930 or 31. So yeah, 33. So like full sound pictures were already out, and they were still making silence into the 30s. But so it wasn't an abrupt change, but people fell off pretty quickly. And once they were of no use to the studios, they were fucking broke and desperate and fucked up, because Norma Desmond is not sort of born of a vacuum. Like her character is based on some very real, very sad characters like Claire Bow. Mary Pickford, I think, was another one who really struggled with like mental health. The reason we get this movie, so there's a couple different versions to this story. One of them is that sort of like it's inspired by these women who really couldn't make the transition, and they sort of either got caught up in substance abuse or their mental health deteriorated to a kind of point that they were, pretty bad off. The other version of the story is that Billy Wilder goes to a party at Romanoff's. I don't really remember the year, but it's this huge industry party, and they sees a guy in the corner who's just sort of like sad and drinking alone, and like everybody's just kind of like, what the fuck is he doing here? And he's like, who is this guy? Like it turns out to be D.W. Griffith, and he's like, well, wait a minute, this because eventually like Griffith gets really drunk, and they're like, all right, get the fuck out of here. It's like Mr. Gower in It's a Wonderful Life, where like give him a boot out the door, and it's like he's like, wait a minute, this guy was like started cinema. Like, why are you all treating him this way? And they were like, well, fucking look at him. He's pathetic now. And he's like, well, we can't just be throwing people away like that. I'm not sure I buy this story because Billy Wilder is not a very sentimental person. No, Billy Wilder also tells a lot of crazy stories. Like I've got one in my notes that is almost certainly false, but he still tells it and it's still funny. But I think there is an acknowledgement that what this movie comes out of, that acknowledgement of like, we can't just throw people away, but that is what this system wants to do because there's so much money and it's so bound up in creating fantasy. And so they're just like, hey, everybody's got to fucking go. Yep. The thing that I think is really interesting though, is that's not really what this movie is about. It is not about the industry moving on and leaving people behind. It's about someone who refuses to evolve with the industry. And that is why she is the way that she is. I think this movie is very deceptive in that way. Like initially you think, she's old and she's not beautiful anymore. And it's like, well, that's not really true. But you sort of start to understand as the film unfolds. But initially you sort of feel like, oh, this is what this is. She's just sort of left behind. It's like, no, she's staying behind because she refuses to evolve with the industry. She doesn't want to be old, and so she refuses to believe that she is, and as such, they're not going to cast her in movies. I think that it goes both ways. I think it's a little bit of both, actually. Like this is an indictment of everybody.
it goes both ways because of Billy Wilder's misogyny. I think he is saying one thing, and yet his actual attitude towards women sort of undermines what he's trying to do.
But at the same time, like he gets Cecil B. DeMille to come in and be a fucking monster at the same time. Like this is.
I think we have a different opinion of DeMille in this film.
All right, because at the same time, like studio heads who saw this movie were incensed by it. So he tapped into something, a real dark side of this that they were very, very angry about. So they attend screenings. They were at the premiere, and their reaction is a little bit of the Lady Doth protest moments. Yeah, since this movie does not cast the industry in a very. I mean,
Louis B.
light.
Mayer was outright hostile towards him.
Yep. He said he couldn't believe it. He chews Wilder out in front of a crowd of celebs at the premiere.
In a really xenophobic way.
Oh, that's right. He's like, yeah, they had to send you back to Germany. And this is like not that long after his family was killed there.
Yep.
According to Nancy Olson, Wilder told him to go fuck himself.
According to Billy Wilder, he told him to go fuck himself. I believe I wrote down what he said.
I'm glad that we got some corroboration on that because there's some stories about Wilder that just.
So he sort of overhears him saying this, and he goes up to him and he says, "Mr. Mayor, would you please kindly go and fuck yourself? I am very proud of what we made, and I always will be." Now I don't know if that's actually what he said, but if she's corroborates it, then he probably said something to that effect. But he was not beholden to Mayer at that point anyway. I mean, he could have done anything he wanted to. He's basically Steven Spielberg at that point.
Right, because this movie is coming off the heels of The Lost Weekend, which won like four Oscars. He had also done Double Indemnity. This guy was, Spielberg. He's Quentin Tarantino after Pulp Fiction. Like he could do whatever the fuck he wanted, and
without the weird feet thing.
Yeah, this is true. So speaking of Oscars,
I can't say for sure. I don't know.
Hollywood's weird, man. So speaking of Oscars, this movie was nominated for 11 total at the 1951 Oscars and mostly lost all of them to All About Eve and Samson and Delilah.
Which is weird because All About Eve is a very similar movie that deals with very similar things. It just does it in a much more lighthearted way.
Yeah. So let's see. William Holden was up for Best Actor. Eric von Stroheim was up for Best Supporting Actor. Gloria Swanson for Best Actress. She lost somehow. Nancy Olson was best.
But she loses to
Betty Davis. Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen All About Eve, but Betty Davis's performance in that is as good as.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a reason that everybody knows All About Eve. Like that's also a great fucking movie. It did win for art direction under Black and White. It was up for cinematography. He was up for Best Director. There was up for Best Film Editing. Franz Waxman won for music. It was up for Best Picture, and Billy Wilder won for Best Writing. So yeah, this was a very high profile. Like that was basically like almost all of its applicable categories.
I would say, other than I think this should have won for cinematography. It is a beautiful movie. So many smart decisions. But other than that, I would say the writing is really great, and I think Franz Waxman's score is really, really fucking top notch in this.
Yeah, it's outstanding because it does, like to what you said, like where it was moving towards like cues. There's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of that mixed in with the orchestration and stuff.
Yeah, when you start they start to do the same thing that they're doing in Italy, where they're moving towards jazz combos. They're moving towards smaller things, and this is just still going fucking orchestra to the hilt.
Yeah. So this movie went into production before the script was even finished, and that was by design because Wilder had knocked it out of the park with Lost Weekend and was riding a wave that few filmmakers ever get, which is carte blanche to do whatever the hell he wanted. But he knew that if Paramount saw the completed script and fully understood the movie he was trying to make, they'd deep six the entire plan because they could do that no matter how much, gravity, how much cachet he had won.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, movies are entirely bankrolled by the studios. There's no outside investors at this point. So it's like if they decide that this is too much of a risk, then they'll just pull the whole thing. And they did it a lot. Yeah.
Also, Billy Wilder coined the term meet cute. Yeah, it was his creation.
Look at you, Billy Wilder.
Yeah. The original negatives for this movie are long gone. Nobody knows where they vanished to, and they've probably long since given way to vinegar syndrome. If the reels are anywhere, they're in a dozen cans full of brown soup.
Universal. This is Universal Picture, right?
No, this is Paramount.
This is okay. I mean, there were so many fires at these studios too, where like so much shit got destroyed.
Yeah, I can't remember which one it was that we did in Bring Me the Axe, but it was in our episode about the old dark house.
Yeah,
where it was
that was
like,
one that was destroyed in the fire.
Where it was something like 50% of movies made from 1950 on have been, or from before
from
1950
back
have been lost forever.
Yeah, because celluloid is combustible. It burns and melts and just
nitrate is combustible. And this was one of the last movies that was actually made with nitrate stock. If you don't know this,
it's entirely possible that it just
it's true. If it didn't just melt down to nothing, it probably burst into flames suddenly and very violently. If you don't know nitrate stock, they used it for a very long up until 1950, like I said, but the shit could catch fire at nothing. It was like the most flammable material in the world. It burned extremely hot very quickly. It plays kind of if you've seen Inglourious Bastards, it plays a real big role at the end of that movie. But yeah, like you couldn't travel on like streetcars.
You mean the newer one? Nothing.
Yes, they didn't use nitrate stock in the Castellari one.
No, you should see the Castellari one though, because he's just better than Quentin Tarantino.
It's a fucking hell of a movie.
He's an adorable little Italian man.
So this movie was adapted for television twice in 1955 and 1956, and it was adapted to the stage by Andrew Lloyd Webber in the 90s. I believe Glenn Close plays the Norma Desmond character.
More recently, she did. I can't remember who did it. I think it might have been who was the one that was on Arrested Development. I can never remember her name.
Oh shit! Yeah. Here's $5. Go see a Star Wars.
Yes. God damn it,
Lucille Bluth. We'll just call her that.
It was supposed to be when they finished the movie, Gloria Swanson wanted to make it a musical sort of immediately and was working with two guys, two songwriters to do that. And it just kept kind of snowballing. Who is the guy? The guy who made the documentary about Divine, made I Am Divine, made the Tab Hunter documentary.
I don't know his name, but I know who you're
made
talking
the Jack
about.
Wrangler doc. He's made a fuckload of documentaries. He's a really good filmmaker. He made a documentary about this. I think it's called The Hollywood Story. And it's all about how their attempts to get this made into a musical and how it never takes off. And it's because Gloria Swanson did not like Billy Wilder, and Billy Wilder didn't like Gloria Swanson that much either. And they were kind of constantly at odds. She hated the way that he wrote the Norma Desmond character because she thought she should be more sympathetic. She thought she should be poor. She really wanted her to be a more, I think, realistic portrayal of what that character would have been, and less less wild and less crazy. Because, I mean, the character of Norma Desmond has this sort of like King Lear madness that is just there. It is constant, and it moves at a weird pace. It doesn't quite work, I don't think. But she wanted this other story, and so she'd been working with this couple. They were songwriting partners. They were actually also a gay couple. And he made a documentary about them trying to get this thing off the ground. It doesn't really work. There's some weird licensing stuff. And then by the time they're really ready to get their shit together, Andrew Lloyd Webber has come along, and he basically they were like, well, he kind of got here first, even though the studio had said, yeah, sure, if you're ready to do it, we'll do it. But he got to them first, and so they did, and that's how we get the thing. It's sort of a sad story, but
sad story in Hollywood. Who would have thought?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing but fucking sad. I've got more sad stories to throw your way in just a bit because there's nothing but that.
Yeah, but this movie. Now I've thought about this a lot since watching. I watched this a bunch of fucking times, like this week. Just I enjoy it that much, but I can't think of any other movie that blurs the line between fantasy and reality in the way that this one does, sort of its era. And I can't think of any contemporaries that would have done this, but like studios are still terrified at the prospect of confusing viewers. But back then, this was absolutely fucking unspeakable. And yet, this is a movie about making movies. It features real people from the industry playing themselves in a work of fiction.
And this is like fucking Cameo the movie. I mean, the number of people that are in this as themselves is nuts.
The thing is, this is a movie nerds movie in the way that sort of that like 90s New Hollywood movie was making movies that were thick with in-jokes and like references. Like this one just got to it way before. This is a meta movie that's way ahead of the curve on that.
And it's so like I'm in the same boat. I've been thinking about it since I think I watched it on Wednesday. I mean, I've seen this movie a shitload of times. When I was in high school, I sort of did that thing that I think a lot of people do where they're like, I'm going to go through the AFI list.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when when you're a teenager, a lot of stuff kind of goes over your head. And I've probably seen this a bunch of times since then, but I hadn't seen it in a while. And I'm watching it and I'm kind of blown away as I'm watching it because it is, the writing is fucking snappy as hell.
Yeah.
The acting is incredible, but I just kept thinking about it over and over all week. And it is such a smart movie. There's so many layers to it. And it is doing so much in that, like, not in that way that, like, like you brought up Tarantino. And I think Tarantino does this in a much more like, he uses it more like a cudgel where you're like, I get it. You're fucking quippy and smart and you've seen movies. Great. This is more of that, just like, it just keeps building and you're like, oh shit. It's actually about this. And actually this person is really this person. It just grows and grows. And it is fucking wild to just think like this is a movie from 1950.
Yeah, I had a very similar sort of phase when I was in school, when I was living in Florida, because I went to school for visual effects, and so I was also down there with like a lot of film students. But like everybody I would talk to about movies was like, oh man, my favorite director is Steven Spielberg, which fine. But then there would be people who are like, oh, my favorite director is Michael Bay because it was the 90s and he was kind of on an upswing.
And hey, look, he's a piece of shit, but hey, the guy makes an action movie.
Yeah, but I would talk to people about like older movies because we grew up among this thing. Like this is like really much of our dad's scene.
Yes.
And so, but I would bring this up, and people would just get like, you would just see the fucking question mark over their head like a cartoon and shit. And so I would be like, fuck this shit. Like I'm going to revisit the whole thing. And and this was one of them. And I think this might have been like one of the first times that I actually watched the movie. But also, when Mulholland Drive came out,
yes,
there were times when I watched it and I was like, this.
You can see there's a huge this movie in particular, but I think Wilder in general is a big influence on David Lynch.
Yes, and because I'll mention it when we get there. But there's a really huge Twin Peaks connection to this as well. But while I'm watching Mulholland Drive, which might be my favorite David Lynch movie, I'm watching it and I'm like, is this like a riff, like a cover of, like this is a David Lynch cover of Sunset Boulevard? Because the parallels are so strong.
I think he does. He tries to do a lot of things. But you can see, and it's really interesting to bring him up because you can see the influences that, Wilder's influences as well. Like you can see Todd Browning all over this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Even if it's just visually, but in the writing, you can hear Frank Capra. You can hear, I can't remember Capra's writing partner's name. Goodwin, I think might have been the last name. I can't remember. But you can hear that kind of like noir patter, that really kind of quippy dialogue. You can really you can see he is doing to them what I think Lynch will do later with this.
Yeah, yeah. So shall we get into it?
Let's do it.
All right. So we open on the title card, Sunset Boulevard, painted on the curb above the gutter.
Which it's such a fucking brilliant moment, like right out of the gate.
Oh God, I know, because this movie
it's got cigarette butts in the fucking gutter.
This movie is steeped in symbolism,
and we put the trailer on the Instagram there, and if you watch the trailer, you can see this scene is in the trailer where they just kind of flash by, and it's like, it's just a street, everybody.
Yeah, but everybody who was interviewed about Wilder talks about how he was sort of like a writer-first director, meaning that you stuck to the script. There's zero ad-libbing. You do it as it's written, and that he relied entirely on the dialogue to tell the story, which is why this movie is so voiceover heavy.
And that is, I think, I have a lot of thoughts about that, but I think that might not be the best choice. But it feels very like Stephen King-y in that way, where it's like, say it the way I wrote it.
Yeah, like I don't mind it. But and while
play it like it is on the CD.
While that may be true of his other movies, the whole thing with the just play it straight, I can say for certain this movie has a layer of symbolism that drives his entire message home right off the bat. The implication that Hollywood is the fucking gutter.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that too.
And he wasn't quite so hardline as people make him out to be. He was actually very sort of open to ideas and collaboration. Like you said, they go into this movie with a half-finished script. And so people are throwing out ideas as they move along because they don't have a full story. And he was like, sure, let's try it and see what happens.
Yeah. So a parade of police cars come racing down the street as the voiceover
Just right up onto the lawn.
as the voiceover narration informs us that there's been a murder at one of these old-timey movie star palaces from the 20s. And this is in the 10,000 block of Sunset, which is out by Beverly Hills.
And I think this is what establishes the movie as a noir, is that it really, and this comes off of, when is Double Indemnity? It's like 46 or something like that.
Let's see, because Lost Weekend is 46. I think Double Indemnity might be 47 or 48, because it was after.
It's right around there, and he uses that same device, and the narration device in film doesn't really work very well, because a film is supposed to show you and not tell you, whereas a book is supposed to tell you, and so it feels clunky from the very beginning. But what it does do, and I don't really like the way it unfolds, and interestingly, a lot of critics at the time also didn't like that. They were like, this feels clumsy and terrible.
Right. I didn't really see any like reviews in the long form, but I saw like bits and pieces. Critics were largely dismissive of this movie when it came out.
They either liked it or didn't really. They either liked it or weren't that interested in it. Yeah. Nobody did
not like it. They were just kind of ambivalent toward it.
But of the ones that were sort of ambivalent, this was the part that a lot of them really didn't like, because it is clunky. It feels clumsy to open a story, especially when your character is dead and then works backwards. But what this narration does that's really interesting, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, but it makes the character of Joe Gillis, the William Holden character, it makes him the protagonist of the story and forces us to see everything from his perspective. Yeah. And we never know. It's sort of, he does the same thing in Double Indemnity. It's like, you never quite know if you can trust this person, because in Double Indemnity, it's Fred McMurray's character that sort of does the telling. And so you're left with this one person's perspective of something. And that one person is a very frustrated, cynical man. Yeah.
Like, this movie is going to sort of edge towards different genres. Wilder always did kind of work in the genres, but he was deliberately trying not to in this one. But this movie really is a noir at its heart. And
I think he had a default mode, and I think it was that.
Yeah. And so, like, central to the whole thing is an unreliable narrator. So, the narrator intends to tell us the real story of what happened before all the Hollywood hacks get their hands on it, blow it out of proportion, which is something that certainly happened. There's a body floating in the pool, shot 3 times. He's nobody important, the narrator says, just a writer.
Boo.
Yeah. So
Get over yourself.
I know. The next shot is the body in the water, shot from below, which is a great bit of camera trickery since the production wasn't prepared to do anything underwater. That kind of camera tech was very, very new. 35 millimeter movie cameras were still quite large at the time. So the DP came up with a plan to put a mirror on the bottom of the pool and shoot the reflection, which is like movie magic. I love that.
Now, I think when you watch it in 1080, you can sort of tell, but it doesn't matter.
Once I found that out, I was like, oh shit, this is totally a reflection. Because it looks a little weird, yeah. The swimming pool death scene is not the original opening.
Oh, no.
No, the movie originally started at the LA County morgue with Gillis's body on a slab along with some others, and each body gives a sort of short story about how it ended up in the morgue before Joe gives the monologue. But this apparently made test audiences roar with laughter, which is
But do you know why?
No.
Because they saw the toe tags on the bodies and they were like, oh, what silliness is this? Because people didn't know that was how they would identify bodies. Like, this is how you would label them. And so they thought it was kind of a joke. Yeah. And so they all laughed like it was kind of an uncomfortable moment. They were like, oh, this is so funny. And it was like, well, no, that's just how else he gonna?
Yeah, because Wilder intends this to be a little absurd, but like not like that. Like people were like,
this is a dark comedy in every way.
Yeah, like people were like rolling in the aisles and shit. And he was like, nope, gotta scrap this.
But I think that's where you can see some of that Capra kind of writing, where it's like, oh, this feels very like that idea feels very Capra to me. Like, it's a little goofy and it's silly, and obviously he didn't intend it to be, but
no. But flashback to 6 months, we meet Joe Gillis, a struggling Hollywood writer whose best days are behind him.
Fucking sitting in his bathrobe, on his bed, writing on a big old typer, living the dream.
Yeah, he's living at the Alto Nido Apartments in Hollywood. This building still stands and is still the Alto Nido Apartments.
I'm going to go live there.
Yep. At the
I'm going
time,
to be a struggling writer there.
this area of Hollywood was populated by writers trying to break into Hollywood. I don't know how anybody actually fucking lives out there, because I was in Los Angeles last year about this time, and gas was $6 a gallon in fucking Pasadena.
I think everybody makes probably a lot more money.
It's just it was insane. But you could get.
I will go live there right now. Fuck New England. We are almost in April, and it is 42 degrees or whatever.
Oh yeah, there's literally snow on the fucking ground, and this movie's had me thinking about Los Angeles a lot, which is a city that I'm like pretty much obsessed with.
Yeah, I feel like we should have said that up top. Both of us, I think it is fair to say, romanticize the shit out of Hollywood.
Yeah,
especially old. I literally sent you a text message 4 hours ago that said, "Holy crap, I love old Hollywood."
Yeah, it's. It really, just visiting there and sort of like seeing the reality of like Hollywood Boulevard and shit diminished that fascination none. Like, I am still like really, really on top of it. I
think that is why, one of the reasons why the movie works so well then and now is like that fantasy factory that Hollywood was so effective that it just carries through. Like, if you grew up in the 80s and the 90s, your parents grew up watching shit in the 50s and they pass that on to you. And it's like, now I don't know that we can talk about this much later, but like, I don't know that it resonates as much, but like you said, our father is a huge cinephile, particularly of this era. And so we, I think, have come to romanticize it in that same way. I think we realize a lot more of the sort of darkness and unsavoriness of it. But it still has that same effect that we can go there and be like, holy crap, that's where blah, blah, blah happened.
Yeah. Like, I went to fucking Hollywood Forever and was like, holy shit, look at that grave. Look at that one over there.
This movie will use that same kind of effect to its own purposes. Like, there are moments where he rolls up on Schwab's drugstore. And it's like, why does everybody know Schwab's drugstore? That's where Lana Turner was supposedly discovered. It's actually not where Lana Turner was discovered.
But that was, they call it the headquarters for a reason, because that really was a hangout for struggling filmmakers. Not the A-listers, but like first ADs and shit like that. And
but
writers.
This is why there's that phrase, LA plays itself, because LA is a character in everything. And it is very much a character in this movie.
Yep. So Joe is visited by two heavies who purport to be from the finance company. They're here to repossess his car, but he's cannily...
They're just repo men. I feel like they give him a lot more influence in this film than maybe they deserve. Because
they've got that one. There's that one, because there's the guy who does all the talking, and then there's the heavy. And that dude's got a gnarly face scar too.
Yeah. I mean, these are basically like the weasels from Roger Rabbit.
Roger Rabbit.
It's just like, see?
Yeah. So, they're here to repossess his car, but he has cannily stashed it out of sight and gets them to fuck off, buying him some time.
Because Joe Gillis is a dirtbag, everybody.
Buying him some time to come up with the $300 he needs to pay for the last few months of missed payments. So, Joe goes over to Paramount Pictures. We see him entering through the Bronson Gate, which is where Charles Buczynski got the idea to become Charles Bronson.
And thank God for it.
Yeah. He meets with a producer who likes him, a guy named Sheldrake.
This guy's name is Fred Clark. He is in, I don't know if you recognize him. This guy's in fucking everything.
I thought I did.
Every movie. And I could be like, wait, was he the guy who played that? And it turns out no, but he's in everything else.
Yeah. He's there's a great line. He's a smart producer with a set of ulcers to prove it. So right off the bat, this movie is one of the most eminently quotable pictures that I've ever seen. Wall-to-wall bone mows. And once Norma Desmond is introduced, Wilder brings his fucking A game. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering how much of it, because this isn't all Wilder. Wilder had a writing partner named Charles Brackett.
Yeah, Charles Brackett, I think, has a lot. I think Billy Wilder gets a lot of attention because he's also the director of a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
I think Charles Brackett was probably the smarter, more judicious of the two.
Yeah. Because Brackett's also the producer on this picture, which is why I think they get away with as much as they do with this. Because also, this movie skirts around the Hays Code in a way that must have had those fucking guys going crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Joe meets with Sheldrake to pitch him a baseball story called Bases Loaded.
Yeah, and here's the big twist, everybody. A lady goes into the bullpen. Can you believe it? I like to believe that this is how pitches still work.
Yeah. But when one of Sheldrake's readers, Betty Schaefer, comes in with her thoughts, she shoots the project down, reporting that it's just not very good.
This bitch. Listen, Betty is out here opening a shade store immediately. I find it very hard to believe. Now, her attitude in this movie is essential to the kind of way the plot unfolds, and it's essential to the way these characters develop. But I find it very, very hard to believe that a young woman in her position at this point would be that opinionated in front of her boss or in front of any other man.
I think you're correct. Now, there were certainly women who held like power positions.
Yeah,
but
she's not one of them.
It was rare as hell, and they were in very predictable spots. Like
that woman, she's at the end of the movie. Yeah. This one is not. She's like 22. And
she's a reader. That's all. That's all she is.
So she's essentially.
And that's literally what. That's literally what she does. She literally
would have been called a script girl.
Yeah.
Like that is what her title would have been.
She reads the scripts, she writes a little synopsis, and she gives it to the producers so that they don't have to, read the 10,000 fucking scripts they get a day.
And I think as much as I like her, what is it, Nancy Olsen? Is that her name?
Nancy Olsen is her. Yeah.
And I like her. I think she's a good actor. And I think she does pretty well in the role. I just think the casting is not great, only because she's too young.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because she makes... So Norma Desmond, and age is an important part of everybody's role in this movie, but William Holden is supposed to be a little bit on the younger side, even though he's like 32, 33 or something like that?
Yeah, the character's 32. I think, honestly, that because everything is so deliberate in this movie, I think that she is supposed to be a sort of... she's the opposite end of the spectrum, because like he doesn't fall evenly between the two of them, but she is closer to his age than Norma is. She's a little bit more appropriate, but also she's also
him look older.
She does.
And that undermines, I think, the larger story, because she makes him feel older, but also just look older. Now, it doesn't help that he was an alcoholic and, so he's going to look a little bloated and whatever, but like he just ends up looking older because she's like 22 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's also a joke in here about turning down Gone with the Wind, which was notoriously rejected by just about every studio in Hollywood.
Because it's wildly racist. Yeah. That's not why it was rejected.
No. People don't give a shit about that. But there's a ton of like inside industry jokes in this picture.
Yeah, this is an inside baseball movie. Yeah, if ever there was one.
Yeah. So Joe practically begs for some side work before outright asking Sheldrake for $300, which sets up a fade to joke about how Sheldrake, a major studio producer, is very, very bad with money.
So this is where I want to jump in with this, that I think this character of Joe Gillis, I think it is written from a very personal place. The character itself.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because he's a very cynical, we come to learn, and very quickly in this moment, that he's a very cynical character. And part of his cynicism comes from, because he does have this kind of monologue about like, you write this big, great movie, but nobody ever knows who you are because you're not the director, you're not the actor. And there is something very frustrating about being a vital part of something that is wildly popular, but getting little or no credit for that thing, and nobody ever really knows who you are. And that, I think, becomes doubly frustrating when you're doing all of that at the expense of whatever it is you actually want to do, like your own ideas. So he's talking about like he is writing this shit that like, because the stuff he's pitching is like, they don't want it because it sucks.
Oh, no. That's the thing is earlier in his career, like he made a name for himself as being a not great, but like a pretty good writer, a guy who was capable of saying more than just like popcorn shit. And the thing is in this is he hasn't sold a script in a while, and so he's just pitching stupid fucking bullshit.
And this is the B plot of the story that doesn't really get explored very well, but I do think there's something about this character that feels, there is a bitterness to him that feels genuine, and it feels very personal in that way of like, you will do this thing and you'll get paid for it, but nobody knows that you're the reason this thing exists. They just know that, Norma Desmond, like they know the big names. They don't know you, and they never will. And you're doing all of this at the expense of doing whatever it is you really want to do.
Oh,
Because
sure.
that's what happens later is like he does get re-inspired. But at this moment, the writer's block and all this other shit is so strong that he's a hack. He can't do anything because he's been a hack. And he's just like, I'm out of ideas, basically.
Yeah.
And he becomes cynical. That is what leads him to the path that he goes down eventually.
Yep. So we cut to Schwab's pharmacy, where Joe makes a few phone calls to see if he can drum up the money he needs. Schwab's pharmacy, like we said, was a real place in Hollywood. It's where industry people actually hung out, networking and writing. The exterior was the real Schwab's, but the interior was built to great authenticity on a soundstage. Like for some reason, Wilder felt like we really got to make this look like the real place. When 99% of the people watching the movie have never set foot inside of Schwab's. The real Schwab
I
is
find
gone.
this shit so fascinating, though. Like, if you ever watch Rear Window, it's like they built a functioning apartment complex, essentially, on a soundstage.
Yeah.
Just for, like, nobody would fucking know. It has running water in it and electricity. It's like, nobody's going to know if it doesn't, and yet they do it.
It's just you know what it is I think that these are leftover philosophies and sort of just the way you did it. They didn't have they were at this time they were getting into things like matte paintings and miniatures and stuff like that. But in the silent era, when they wanted to make like an Egyptian temple, they built an entire fucking Egyptian temple. Because that's
that is literally where the term white elephant comes from.
Yeah.
If for those who do not know, there was I think it was Cleopatra. Is that what it was?
Yes.
The original Cleopatra. They built these gigantic, like enormous white elephant statues for this thing that just sat in Hollywood for decades. And it was like, oh, these are they built these giant things and now they're completely useless and stupid. And they're so expensive that they refuse to tear them down.
It's sunk cost fallacy in action.
It really is. It's amazing.
So, Joe finds his agent on a golf course, making with the golf sticks. I love that line. He asks for a loan, but the agent rebuffs him, telling him that he could give him the loan, but he won't because hunger makes a better writer.
Now, this, I think, when we get to the end, we can talk about this, but I think this is what makes this movie still feel relevant, is this idea of starving will make you a better artist. And I mean, we saw this in the writer's strike where people were like, we'll starve them out. They'll kowtow to us eventually. And it's like, God damn these fucking monsters.
Yeah, that's the thing is the message of this movie is evergreen. It's an industry that does not change. It's not quite as micromanaged as it used to be, but like they still do shit like arranged marriages and like girlfriend boyfriend pair ups for the media and stuff.
Oh no, that goes on for quite a long time. That goes on at least until the 60s. I mean, this is the new Hollywood movement is what undermines all of this and sort of destroys it. But yeah, the idea of like it's that fantasy factory, like. So many of these actors were gay men, and yet they were married to women because the Hollywood studio system said, you can't be gay. I don't care what you want to do in your bedroom, but you're not going to do it at fucking Romanoff's, or you're not going to do it anywhere else. Like, you're not going to do it in public.
The set decorator on this very movie is one of those gay men who used to be an actor, but then when he was outed, he couldn't be in the movies anymore, so he was like, fuck it, I'll just design the interiors.
Yeah, and he actually, I believe he ended up building quite a career for himself.
Yeah. He's a very famous, decorator.
Now, unfortunately, I think this is a moment where Wilder could have leaned in, and he doesn't. Instead, it gives that like, oh man, old Joe can't catch a break. Like it's just like, because listen, I get that this character Joe Gillis is the protagonist, but Jesus, he is exhausting.
Yeah, he's a whiny bitch.
He is the kind of white guy. It gets real fucking boring fast.
Yeah. So driving back to his place, Joe realizes that he's going to have to go back home to Ohio, hat in hand, and get a job at the local paper when he accidentally runs into the guys from the finance office. They give chase. Joe's car suffers a blowout, which drives him to take shelter in the driveway of a rundown old mansion.
I think even the idea that he's like, I'm going to have to go back and live in Ohio and take my old job back. Now, listen, I don't know if anybody's like me. I am basically a lunatic, hysterical woman, essentially. Anytime something goes wrong, I'm just like, well, that's it. Pack it up. Time to go back to New Hampshire. May as well kill myself. This is basically what they're establishing Joe as something, and they don't, I don't know, maybe it doesn't resonate as well today just because it doesn't. It's just things have changed so much. But like, he is a very, very frustrated man. And I didn't get it the first time I watched it this time around. I had to think about it a lot. But he's a very frustrated person. And that is why he makes all the decisions he makes. Because he feels like a whiny asshole. And he is a whiny asshole. And I think maybe the reason I don't want to recognize it is like because of what I just said. Like, you see a lot of that if you are that kind of person where it's like, well, I guess everything's terrible. Time to just pack it up and give up.
Yeah. Well, okay. So a lot of the guys that I like when I got out of school, I was faced with a choice of moving out to like LA and trying to kind of break into special effects, or come back here and do something else that I was very good at. And I ended up doing the latter. But all of my friends did the former and were back home absolutely fucking broke and with like thousands in credit card debt because their like year in Los Angeles just absolutely crushed them. So when I would talk to them, I could like this Joe Gillis character felt very familiar to me because it was all of those guys. I think one of the guys that I went to school with ended up sort of like making it, and like he fucking made it. Like he was he was a visual effects supervisor on like the Avengers and shit. Like that guy broke big, but like literally everybody else like had to go fucking home to New Jersey and shit like that.
And I think, I mean, that's the key to understanding this character of Joe is that every decision he makes is that frustrated decision, because very often I have to sort of smack myself in the face and be like, hey, asshole, you are a professional writer. Why don't you shut up? And this is the thing that he is incapable of really doing. And as the movie unfolds, you sort of keep questioning, like, does Joe even really want to do this? Does he even really care? Because he talks a big game about writing what matters to him and all this other bullshit. And yet he goes out of his way to actually avoid doing any of it. And then begrudgingly engages in this relationship. Yeah,
because when we pick up with him, he's definitely in that spot where he's just writing shit that he thinks that the studio will go for. And it's boring, dumb bullshit.
Which is why the studio doesn't want it.
Yeah, which he would not have written 10 years ago, like when he was younger, when he first sort of like landed his first big credit.
Which I think it's a brilliant way to write a character, because it is a very confrontational character, which is I think why I struggled with it so much is like I see so much of myself in that I'm like, I fucking hate this person. And then like as the days go by and I'm like, oh wait, I think I understand why he's supposed to be sympathetic. I still don't find him very sympathetic. A little bit.
No.
Much.
I don't find him sympathetic at all. There are times when I find Norma Desmond very sympathetic.
Yes.
But not him. Not at all.
And I think the reverse was supposed to be true.
Because, yes, probably. But, like, what we're going to find out is Gillis is really kind of a wrecking ball. Like, he's just a destroyer. And we'll get there when we get there.
And that's what I mean, is that he is a person who is operating from a place of frustration all the time. And yet he never really wants to get himself out. Even when he is given opportunities to get himself out of the situation, he still sort of doesn't do it because it's so much easier to be frustrated than it is to sort of take responsibility for yourself and recognize that you're being a jerk.
Man, you're being so real right now.
It was rough. It was been a rough week. I'm telling you what.
So Joe hatches a plan to stash the car while he gets out of town, thinking that no one could possibly live in this place. This house.
This is where John Seitz fucking shines.
Oh, the interior of this house is fucking amazing. This house was built for an early California millionaire named William Jenkins, whose family lived there for a year before abandoning it.
I'm sure he probably murdered someone and then they all fled or whatever.
There's probably fucking bodies.
Man, Hollywood was nuts.
If the baby taught me anything, there's bodies buried under the swimming pool. It was known. This is my favorite part. It was known to locals as the Phantom House.
I believe they also used it in Rebel Without a Cause.
Yes, yeah. So it remained empty until the 30s when it was snatched up by notorious LA piece of shit, J. Paul Getty.
The one whose grandson was kidnapped, and he was like, look, we don't negotiate with terrorists. They were like, they just sent you his finger. And he was like, hey, what did I just say?
Yeah.
We don't negotiate with terrorists. Look,
Even
things did not work out well for J. Paul Getty's grandson. I promise you that.
No, even the terrorists were like, damn, bro, I'm real sorry.
They really were. They were like, I think we should just let him go. I don't think this is working.
Yeah. So Joe is about to leave when he's called to the house by a woman hidden behind the blinds, and her manservant gestures to him from the door, directing him inside. And they seem to have mistaken him for someone else, but he goes along with them since they give him little choice in the matter. So,
And so he walks in, and this is this is where, again, John Seitz, it's so incredible. L.A., the L.A. of this movie, the outside, the actual Los Angeles, is so bright. It's so sunny. It's alive.
Yes, which is weird. This is a noir movie that takes place.
Yes.
About 50% of the movie takes place in the sunlight.
Yes. And if you watch some of the other stuff that he does with Billy Wilder, they don't do it quite like this, because Double Indemnity also takes place in Los Angeles. I think all their movies do, but it's a very dark Los Angeles. This one is not. This is Hollywood. Mm-hmm. It is big and it is bright. And as soon as you get inside that house, this is Dracula's castle.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that is on purpose, but it's also, this is where you start to see the effect of Todd Browning, the influence of Todd Browning.
100%. So this is the first part that I think really kind of makes this movie apropos for our formula, because it's fleeting. It's not pervasive. It's not like a ubiquitous theme throughout the movie. But this moment right here is absolutely a dark house movie. It is a crumbling castle in just on the edge of the Hollywood Hills. He goes in, he's met with this kind of like ghoulish manservant who also ends up playing the fucking organ like Lurch later on.
Oh, so good.
And but the interior of the house is like when Jonathan Harker goes into Dracula's castle for the very first time. I think they will use, and that's the moment. And if for those of you who have seen Dracula, you might recognize a lot of these shots. For those of you who have not seen Dracula, what the fuck is wrong with you? Go out and see Dracula immediately. That movie's incredible. But there are moments, the way that they shoot the people's movements in these big cavernous spaces, because I understand what these houses were to represent opulence. Like they were, there was a style in the 20s. If you're familiar with American history, you know that a lot of things in this period were designed around like Roman architecture, Greek architecture. They were designed to sort of evoke that feeling of greatness and of achievement. And that's why everything is so big and everything is cavernous and huge. You see this in theaters from the right. I was going to say like
transitional.
Out our way, we got movie theaters and movie houses. Out in California, they got movie palaces like the Egyptian theater and the Chinese theater. And what's that one that's the geodesic dome? I can't remember the name of it.
The one on the hill, not the planetarium.
No, not that. It's a theater that's like right down, and I think it might be on Sunset, it might be on Hollywood. I can't remember the name of it.
But so the purpose of all that was to evoke big greatness and achievement, the works of great men, essentially, and that is what this architecture is supposed to evoke, and that is what these houses evoke, is this idea. And I'm looking at this house, I'm just like, how do you fucking decorate something like this? Like, how do you have that much furniture? And nobody, like, they bought it. Nobody needed these houses. These houses were giant and empty. And that's why they killed each other. They had nothing else to do. After you decorate the house, you're done. I mean, what else are you at?
Yep.
And so when he walks in, it's this big gothic empty thing. It's just like when Harker walks into the castle and Dracula sort of comes down this, into the room, and he does the Children of the Night and all that bullshit. Yeah. It's these big sweeping grand things. And it is just like you are in another place now. Just moments ago, you were outside in big sunny California, 1950, and now you are in this cold, dark space that is so huge and cavernous and feels menacing.
Oh yeah, and it's peopled by crazy people. So like you have crossed a threshold, and now the rest of your life is going to be just framed by madness.
But they're just vaguely crazy at this point. You're like, this feels wrong. Something's not right here.
Yeah, because the very first thing that
this lady has a monkey corpse in her house.
The manservant Max says is, he asks him if he needs help with the coffin. So yeah, he's received by the occupant of the house, a woman in sunglasses and a luxurious dress. There's a body on the table in her bedroom, kept under a sheet.
And now this is where she comes down, and this is her iconic moment. She's got the sunglasses, she's got the head wrap, she's got, like, this is Norma Desmond fucking to the nines.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that, like, big gothic, like, descending the stairs moments with her, too.
Yes.
Like, they really make use of that fucking foyer.
And this is that idea of, like, even if you've never heard of this movie before, you have seen references to it in everything. Like, from Carol Burnett to American Dad, you have seen references to this movie many, many times in your life.
Yeah. So the woman insists, just out of the gate, insists on a fancy coffin for the body and a burial in the garden behind the house. And when she moves the sheet, the body's arm falls out, and it's that of a chimpanzee. So the chimp is symbolic of Joe Gillis. Norma Desmond wants someone in her life that she can pamper and dress up, but will not turn on her. But that situation.
Also, apparently Billy Wilder would insinuate repeatedly that she was having sex with this monkey.
Yes. So this is the story that I guarantee
he's an asshole.
I guarantee is not true, but
I think it actually is sort of true.
In the 90s, when the Weber musical was opening, Billy Wilder was there in London for the premiere, and so was Nancy Reagan. And she asked
because they were friends. Ronald Reagan was very good friends with Billy Wilder and very good friends with William Holden.
Yeah, and so everybody wants to know what the deal is with the monkey. And the monkey is a symbol. It's very much a symbol in the movie, but like nobody really got it. And so
I also think it represents the sort of eccentricity of Hollywood at the time.
Oh, sure. Because like also Michael Jackson did the exact same thing. Like he had a fucking chimp that went with him everywhere. Like he was
he was also very crazy.
Yeah. So
speaking of Nickelodeon in the 90s.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
But
look, it happened. I didn't do it. It has nothing to do with me. It happened.
But so Nancy Reagan asks him, like, what's the deal with the chimp? And he says, don't you understand? Norma was fucking the monkey.
So, but apparently when they were shooting, he would be yelling like, no, bigger, Norma. It's your lover. And people were sort of like, they were like, oh, he means like you're torn apart. This is your companion and it has died. But he kept sort of driving it home. And they were like, oh, I think he's just fucking with her.
Yeah.
Because he was an asshole.
Yeah. Because honestly, I like the way that she sort of addresses it, where she is completely removed from this.
And this, I think, is a good point to say. Gloria Swanson is the reason this movie is not Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. And that's not to say that I think Whatever Happened to Baby Jane is a fantastic movie. I think everybody in it does a fantastic job. I think it's a great production. But it is an undeniably campy movie. This could have been that, and it is not because of the way Gloria Swanson plays the Norma Desmond character.
Yeah.
She never slips over into camp fully.
No,
she never is a mad, tragic character. She carries herself with such dignity that has this sort of like, no, fuck you, I'm going to do it this way.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have anything to say about it.
Yeah, she always keeps one foot on the ground, at least. You know, she's anchored a little bit.
And I think that's what makes this character, and maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but like that is what makes this character feel so, I don't know, I don't want to say real, but like less cartoonish, because she could very easily be, again, that King Lear madness where she's just all of the time, she's wild and crazy. And, she was driven to this because of hysteria and because of the vapors or whatever. And I think that's kind of what Billy Wilder had in mind. And I think she refuses to do that because she carries it with dignity. And then she ends up in this relationship that does become a loving romantic relationship in a weird way. It's very dysfunctional, but you see that, you think, oh, she is a real person. And she's the reason this movie actually is elevated to what it is now. Otherwise, it would have been Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which is great in a way, but it is not this.
No. So angry that Joe is not the undertaker that she called to arrange for a monkey funeral, she kicks him out. But on his way out, he recognizes the woman. She's Norma Desmond. She used to be in the pictures. She used to be big, to which she replies, I am big. It's the pictures that got small.
And her fucking face when she says this.
She's got this sneer throughout the whole movie that is
the entire
amazing.
movie. It is a grimace. She is gritting her teeth. This like rictus grin.
It is. She's got this way that she sort of holds her head that's always kind of like tilted back a little bit, and her lips are always parted in a way where she's kind of baring her teeth. It
awesome. Is resentment. It is always resentment.
Yeah. So
and also, this old hag, she's 51 years old.
Yeah. That's something that you gotta bear in mind, because at the end, Joe is going to say something that really kind of drives that point home.
And that is why and when we get there, we'll talk about it, because I think that is why this is not about age and it's not about physical beauty.
Yeah. Because she's quite beautiful.
Well, she was also, Gloria Swanson was like a real health nut kind of person. Like she was really into like all the diet fads, and she was very into like living a healthy lifestyle, because in this movie, in 1950, being 50 years old, you are a hard 50.
Yeah.
And she is not. I mean, there's a point where she holds a magnifying glass up to her face, and you're like, holy, I have more wrinkles on my face than she does.
Yeah. So then, she does a big rant about the Adventist sound.
But we also see in this moment, this is again where you get that sort of Seitz brilliance, where the way that he lights the interior and the exterior is also the way that he lights Joe and Norma. Joe is very bright. He's always in the light. Yeah. Norma is very dark, and she's a little bit blurry sometimes. It's really interesting.
Yeah. There's sometimes where the way that she's shot is almost like the way that they shot women on Star Trek, where they've always got a little bit of a fuzz to the filter.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So Joe introduces himself as a writer, which incenses Norma. She tells him that he wrote a rope of words that will strangle this business.
So fucking good.
Amazing line. And so as he's leaving, Norma stops him and asks him to look at her own script, a movie that she's been writing for years. And it's literally stacks and stacks of handwritten script pages bound in twine. She says, you there, how long is a movie these days? And it's like fucking stacks and stacks and stacks of paper on her desk.
Yeah, it's like reams of paper.
Yeah. She tells him that it's the story of Salome, and that she intends to play the lead.
What I love is that neither one of them pronounce it correctly, but they each pronounce it differently.
Yeah. It's a Hebrew name. You could say it a whole bunch of different ways.
I don't think it was intentional. I just think it's funny that neither of them really say it properly.
No, but I'm gonna keep saying it like that because I love the way that she pronounces it.
It is Salome, just in case anyone is curious.
So Salome is the characteristic silent film subject. So Hollywood silent movies of the 20s tended to be massive. They were multi-hour epics, and biblical subject matter, particularly with Cecil B. DeMille, was pretty captivating stuff. She actually intends for DeMille to direct this, and he did the Ten Commandments once as a silent, and then he did it again with Charlton Heston. And the same year,
by Larry Kramer.
Yeah, and the same year that this movie was produced, DeMille, pictured in this very movie, was making Samson and Delilah. D.W. Griffith more or less tanked his own career with Intolerance, which also had big biblical themes in it.
He was also a drunk and an asshole. It's not like it wasn't just the choices he made. People didn't like him either. He was a very unpleasant man.
Well, yeah, but he literally spent all of his money on that movie. But this particular version of Salome that she's talking about is mostly known for being the creation of Oscar Wilde, because we're going to hear about it, and also from this point on. There are parallels, there's symbolic parallels between that story and sort of the fate of Norma and Joe. So Joe sits...
You mean famed homosexual and raconteur, Oscar Wilde?
You know it. So Joe sits and reads the script, remarking that it's about as bad as it gets, while Norma watches him smoking from a cigarette on a holder fashioned to one of her rings.
It is insane. It is the greatest thing ever.
One of the coolest props. I hope that is at the Academy somewhere.
I imagine probably all this shit got lost.
I know.
Because they recycle a lot of, sure. That's the thing about Hollywood is that's why there's prop departments, that's why there's costume departments, is they recycle a lot of stuff, but so much of it got lost over the years.
But yeah, that's the thing, is they also treated a lot of this stuff like crap. Like the fact that like a lot of like really sort of iconic props and cars and costumes just got thrown away or destroyed or just trashed in the garbage or ruined in other movies. But yeah, this one, that bed of hers is featured in several other movies.
Because the bed was I can't remember what the bed was. The bed was something very important, though.
I can't. It was designed by somebody famous. The only reason I know it is because it's in Phantom of the Opera.
Yes, that was what it was for. It was built for the original Phantom of the Opera, the Lon Chaney version.
Yes. So,
which I think the use of it was probably intentional.
Most likely, because it's pretty recognizable. Like immediately, as soon as I saw it, I was like, "Oh shit, that's from Phantom of the Opera."
Yeah.
But yeah. So when he finishes, Joe realizes that he can bullshit this woman to his heart's content. He sees an opportunity to get paid. My fucking cats are trashing this place right now.
Yeah, that's what happens when you get cats.
So he sees an opportunity to get paid, talks her into letting him help her get the script into a producible state.
This is where I think we're supposed to have sympathy for Joe Gillis. This is where I am lost completely to this character because I'm like, oh, you're just a fucking scumbag like everybody else in this movie.
His immediate thought is, I can exploit this woman.
And that's the thing about this movie is that everybody is kind of exploiting Norma Desmond.
Yeah.
For different reasons and in different ways. But like, we're supposed to think he's the protagonist. He's just a fucking jerk. He's just some fucking guy who sees an opportunity and he's so frustrated and angry that he's like, well, maybe this will pay my bills at least. And it's like, again, who among us, but still, fuck this guy.
Yeah. And so then she finds out that he's of an astrological sign that she likes. She decides,
so great.
Yeah, I know. She decides to house him and hire him. He thinks he's about to get paid. He has no idea what he's in for.
No, he's going to die.
Yeah. So as Max sets Joe up in the room over the garage for the night.
Wait, did we already skip? Did we move past the organ yet?
No, because that's coming up.
Okay.
That's when he wakes up the next morning and he hears because the organ is introduced, and I love the way that it's introduced. Is you keep hearing,
don't ruin it. Don't ruin it.
No, you keep hearing the tone, and it turns out it's just
don't ruin it.
Okay. So as Max sets Joe up in the room over the garage for the night, he tells Joe about the scope of her stardom. There was a Maharaja who begged for one of her silk stockings and then used it to hang himself.
And this is actually not that far off from Gloria Swanson's actual life. I mean, she was a fashion icon. Like, everything she did dictated culture. Yeah. She was the silent film star. Like, there were others, obviously, and, Betty Davis and Greta Garbo and all these people.
Louise Brooks.
But nothing like her. She dictated fashion. She dictated culture. She was this character.
Yeah.
She wasn't crazy, but she was pretty much everything else.
Yeah. So Joe surveys the grounds from his room, seeing an unused tennis court and an empty swimming pool whose only occupants are now rats. More symbols. He also watches Norma and Max, the manservant, laying the chimp to rest in the garden by candlelight.
The chimp is such a fucking bizarre... Even, like... I understand old Hollywood very well, but even now I'm like, this is a strange touch.
Yeah. It's just a story beat to let you know things are fucked up here.
Yeah.
So in the morning, Joe wakes to find that someone has moved him out of his Alto Nido apartment and fully into the room over the garage. He also reports a dream about an organ grinder playing while a monkey danced for pennies. Refer to my earlier comments about how Joe is the new chimpanzee in Norma's life. So he angrily stomps over to the main house and he finds Max casually playing the organ and Norma casually sitting and listening. And she tells him...
And it is some real dark gothic shit too. Like he is like really going for it.
Oh yeah, it's like Phantom of the Opera. Like
it does. I mean, it feels like it is pulled straight from, and this is where again, like Franz Waxman was the perfect choice because it feels like it is pulled from Frankenstein, from these old Gothic Universal films.
Yeah, again, it's just another little detail that sort of like fits this just a little bit into the horror movie milieu, just a little bit. She tells him, Norma that is, that she settled all of his back rent while he slept. Now, later on, as Joe rewrites Norma's script, she becomes irate at him throwing out a scene, opting to cut away from her to John the Baptist. He tells her that viewers don't want too much of her, to which she reveals that she still receives fan letters every day. So we get a little bit more VO of Joe as he reviews the contents of the house. And the place is plastered with photos of Norma, like shitloads and shitloads of pictures of her.
And these are all real photographs of her.
Yes, these were all from her own collection, which is wild because there's like thousands of photos of her in this place. So a couple of times a week, Joe and Norma watch her old silents together. The film that Joe and Norma watch is one of Gloria Swanson's actual silent movies. It's Queen Kelly from 1932, and it was directed by Erich von Stroheim. And it has a sort of unfortunate story around it, where I think he ended up getting kicked off of it as director because it ended up costing way too much money. But the thing was, so when they finished this movie, this is the last time they see each other. She goes to visit him. He does like some stage production or whatever, and she goes to see him. And like she kind of goes backstage and says hello. It doesn't really go over very well because there was a lot of anger between them.
Yeah.
And then they don't see each other again until they show up to work on this set.
No shit.
But the sad part is that they kind of get along very well after this. And they're like, oh, let's see if we can do something with, because they shot so much footage for Queen Kelly that never got used. Like, let's see if we can do something with this. And they were like excited to work with each other again. And then he died like 2 years later.
Oh God.
Because he's older in this movie in general. Like but it is like, it's another one of those moments. It's like, it's kind of a lot of sad shit around this movie.
Yeah. She remarks to Joe as they watch, "Still wonderful, isn't it? And no dialogue. We didn't need dialogue. We had faces." And then she jumps up suddenly, declaring the glory of her return with a sudden swell of the soundtrack. The whole scene's pretty fucking great. It's another one of those ones that just gets like clipped constantly in like the greatest scenes of movies like of all time.
Wait, did we skip over the organ again?
No, I just said it. He walks in and Lurch is playing the organ and she's listening.
Listen, she says the thing about the organ is the wind blows through the window.
Okay, yeah. So that's what she says when she's leading him to the desk that has all of the script pages on it.
The wind blows through the window and it makes this sound. It makes it sound like the organ is sort of like moaning.
Yes,
it is the single greatest detail in any movie ever made. Yep. It is so haunting and hilarious.
It's such a weird sound, but yeah, I only noticed it like in the last couple of viewings.
It's perfect.
Yeah. So Joe also sits on bridge games with Norma's silent film contemporaries. There's H.B. Warner, Anna Q. Nilsson, and Buster Keaton, all playing themselves.
Yep. And they just sit there. Like they're just playing bridge. They don't have any dialogue. They're just sitting there playing a game.
Yep. How do you play bridge?
I don't know. I've never played bridge.
Never played bridge. I have no idea how it's played. I know that you play it in teams, which is unique.
It feels like a very like 50s game to me.
Oh, sure. Like everybody had bridge club and shit.
Like I know they played it. They used to play it on Isle of Lucy all the time.
Yeah. But there's I think it's like season 3 of Fargo kind of hinges on like professional bridge players. I'm fascinated by it. I have no idea how you play it. I don't play a whole lot of like card games like that. Like I always wonder how you play Baccarat because like James Bond is always playing that.
Nope. Never played that one either. I did hear recently about a, what's the one, backgammon, like a competitive backgammon. I do not know how to play backgammon.
I have no idea how you play backgammon either.
My friend Andrea and I used to play that.
That's fucking awesome. So we learned that Joe isn't being paid for his work on the Salome script, but that Norma is providing him with everything he needs otherwise. So she's setting him up. So Joe witnesses Max talking to the finance men from earlier. They're going to tow his car away, making him more reliant on Norma than ever. But it's all good. Joe doesn't need one of those modern cars made from chromium and spit. They have an Asada Fraschini. God, it's hard to say. Asada Fraschini. It's an exceptionally expensive luxury car that would sell at auction easily today for $1 million. She paid $28,000 for it in 1928. Adjusted for inflation, that's over $600,000 today.
The interesting thing about this moment is she says, "You don't need that car. We have a car."
Yes.
We have a car.
Yeah, she's making plans.
So she's already talking about them as though they're a couple. And I think this is where you start to see Wilder's misogyny sort of creeping in is like, she's a Spider Woman. She's luring him in. And it's like, well, is she though? Because the only reason he's there is because he decided to exploit this woman's desperation.
Yes. Yeah. He's definitely seeing it. He's not seeing it the same way that we're seeing it.
And I think this is where it's hard to tell. And I think it is probably not intentional. But that idea of like, we are forced to see this whole story from Joe Gillis's perspective.
Yeah.
And that might be why we see this. Now, because I know who Billy Wilder is and how he was, I don't think that's the case. I think that this is sort of that perspective that undermines the ultimate like theme of the movie, is that he really leans into this idea of sort of like hysteria and like sort of women are hysterical and she's crazy and she's trapping him. And it's like this whole idea. It's like, it's so fucking tired and gross.
Yeah.
But I can see it sucks that like it could have very cleverly gone a different direction. It's like, oh no, it's just because you're a man in 1950. That's why it is this way.
Yeah. The way that the scene is also set up is also quite deliberate, because he's just sat there next to her while they play and nobody speaks to him. He's just there watching them. And it's like almost like all of her friends are like, they've seen this before. This is her latest trophy.
And I think this works very well because, again, I don't know if it's intentional, but like you see him sort of falling into this role of gigolo. Like,
oh yeah.
He's very passive in all of this, but he acts like he's being victimized, and that's why it's so hard to tolerate it.
Yeah, because the very next scene, they're going to really nail that home.
Yep.
Because the next day, while out for a joyride in the very same car, Norma takes Joe shopping for new clothes, has a tailor set him up with the finest in contemporary men's fashion. One of the clothiers brings him some jackets to sample made from some of the most expensive shit in the world. When Joe opts for a cheaper jacket, clothier suggests the more expensive option with a knowing smile. And it's at this point that the grim reality kind of dawns on Joe. He's no longer a writer.
That's the whole fucking point. That's why he's there. Like,
well, okay, so I don't think so. This is more than he bargained for. Like,
right? He thought like, but she's like getting one up. Like, I think this is where we start to like, he's the victim and all this bullshit. It's like he thought, I'm gonna exploit this and get money to write this thing and pay my bills. And like, oh no, she traps him. Like,
yes.
the hunter has now become the prey, such as it is. And it's like, oh, okay, fine.
Yeah. Because these scenes are all about him getting drawn closer and closer to her, and this next one is really where it she kind of closes the door.
But that's my problem with him as a character in general. Is like, man, you could just fucking walk away anytime nobody says you have to stay. You can leave whenever.
Yeah, but it's framed in this sort of way where it's like, well,
like you owe like $200 on your fucking car. Shut up.
Yeah, like she's paying for everything. He's never given any money of his own.
Try America in 2024, bitch.
Yeah, but it really is. It's like an abusive relationship where he kind of comes to rely on her for everything because she's not giving him money. She's just taking care of his finances. Right. But anyways, when the heavy December rain leaks through the roof over his room of the garage, Norma has Joe moved into the main house. Max tells him that it's the room where her husband slept.
The first husband.
Yeah. Joe also notices that
we will come to learn who that is later.
Yeah. Listen, none of the doors in the house have any locks on them. Max explains that Norma's doctor suggested it because she has moments of melancholy.
Yes.
Has attempted suicide several times.
They also have no door handles in general.
Yeah, you just open them up.
No locks, just get rid of the whole handle. No. You don't need it.
So Joe, unbelieving, suggests that she hasn't been forgotten by the public. She still receives fan letters. And then Max more or less tells him that he's the one who sends those letters to her.
And that was actually Eric von Straum's idea.
Oh, God. It's such a brutal moment.
It really is.
Because it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Right. That's the first hint that something is going on here. Because Max is a character. And this is why I think he's such a fascinating character, is you don't quite know what his deal is. He's so invested in her life. You do find out later why.
Yes.
But like, you're just like, is he in love with her? Is he obsessed with her? Is he just sort of like, is he doing what Joe Gillis is doing, and you do understand why at the end why he's doing all this, but you start to realize he is creating this world that she lives in because she lives in a fantasy.
Yes, yeah, yes, and he is central to that, but so is everybody else who plays along.
Right.
Yeah. So at Norma's New Year's Eve party, Joe asks numerous times when the other guests will be arriving, but Norma deflects. Then they dance together, her happily hanging off of Joe when it's revealed that the elaborate party is only for them and no guests will be arriving.
And then she says, "There's nothing like tile for a tango."
Yep. Rudolph Valentino told her to get tile.
Yep.
So now this is where I started to kind of notice this pattern. So you could make a case for this entire movie being a metaphor for the story of Salome, and the Dance of the Seven Veils, and as well as Joe Gillis sort of being a stand-in for for John the Baptist, who in the story. Do you know the story?
Vaguely, I've seen the movie.
So, in the story, what it is it's really kind of a small thing. So it's the Salome is the daughter of King Herod, the second or third. He's a first century king of Jerusalem. And she is in love with John the Baptist, who has been taken prisoner by the king. And she makes repeat advances towards him, but he rejects her. And so her father wants her to perform this dance, to which she kind of says she doesn't want to, but then he's like, "I will give you literally anything you want if you do this dance." So she's like, "I'll do the dance, but so she does it. And then at the end, he's like, "Okay, daughter, what do you want?" She's like, "I want the head of John the Baptist on a plate."
I mean, what lady wouldn't?
I know. So that's kind of the
Bible
story
for you, real wholesome.
But the dance that she does is this dance called the Dance of the Seven Veils, which has a lot of real sort of like esoteric alchemical symbolism to it on its own. But really what it is it's a striptease, basically.
Yeah, it's a real sexy dance, isn't it?
That you do for your father. But yes.
When you're asking for a man's head on a plate. The Bible, everybody.
So what ends up happening is as more she takes a veil off, another veil, but it's a piece of clothing, but it's called a veil. And so in this scene, as they are dancing, she literally takes the veil from her face and throws it on the floor. Yes. So as the movie goes on, she's going to become more, because she's also allowing herself to become more vulnerable with him.
And I think this is where you start to see, like, this is where the movie takes a very important turn, because it could have gone one of two ways. And this is where it goes that way of like, oh, she is this tragic character, but you feel so much sympathy for her because she is a very sad person.
Yes.
Who's just so desperate to hold on to her relevance and her importance in the world, even when the world is like, she's shut the whole thing out. Because at a certain point you realize she was not kicked out of Hollywood. She voluntarily left.
Yes.
Because she couldn't make that transition. This was not like they decided. There could have been a role for her somewhere. Mm-hmm. There were roles for lots of older people. She just could not accept that she was an older person. And so she decided to leave. This is when you start to learn, like, oh, she's the one who shut herself up here. This is not her being sort of like segregated from Hollywood.
Yes, yeah. There's also a really haunting wide shot here from above of the two of them dancing on this empty room.
With a live band playing.
With a live band. And they're doing the tango, which is another symbol, because that particular dance is often a representation of the push and pull between two romantic partners.
Also, there's nothing like tile for a tango.
This is true. You got to trust
It'll
Rudolph.
say it on my gravestone.
You got to trust Valentino. So later on, drunk, Norma hands...
Again, Valentino, notable homosexual and raconteur.
So Norma hands Joe the latest gift, which is a gold cigarette holder, which he rejects. It finally dawns on him, after all of this, that he's the new chimpanzee, and he reacts badly. Norma runs off, humiliated, and Joe leaves. Now, on the way out, his gold watch chain, the chain from his watch catches on the doorknob, which is another sort of reminder.
It is a hilarious moment. There were so many moments in this where I laughed out loud.
Yep.
Because this is a very funny movie.
Oh yeah. It's absurd.
In a way that, like, the humor feels so modern too. Like what I love about it is how sophisticated the movie is. Because there other comedies of the time were very much comedies of their time. This feels
like evergreen. Like it's
And
it's,
a lot of it does feel very much of the era, but the humor of it feels very modern. It's very sarcastic. It's very irreverent. Like it has a very kind of Parks and Rec, that era of humor. Like it feels very kind of like a raised eyebrow at all the times where it's like, and then his watch chain gets caught on the door.
Yeah. So Joe hitches a ride into town to drop in at his friend Artie Green's New Year's Eve party.
Oh, Artie Green.
Artie Green is played by Dragnet's Jack Webb.
Notable piece of shit, Jack Webb.
He's very young here too.
And it's a little bit creepy to see Jack Webb so young because he is such a jar-headed jerk in like everything later on. If for those of you who do not know, Jack Webb was the creator and star of Dragnet. He was the creator of Adam 12.
Yeah,
he was like
he's really in love with the cops. Every episode
he thought he was one.
Every episode of every show that he did was like the cops arrest yet another acid head hippie.
Yeah, like he was big in trying to overhaul because the LAPD was particularly bad throughout the 40s, and he was instrumental
and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s
through now. Yeah. But like he was instrumental in trying to change the public image of the police, and that's why Dragnet is what it is.
Oh,
but he was
that.
A big legal eagle. He's a real douchebag, and he really thought like he was a real kind of big shot when it came to the cops. It's a fucking obnoxious story, but to see him here, he looks like Howdy Doody.
He does. He's very
He
young.
looks like a puppet. He's very thin, but he's like Alfred E. Newman, the human.
Yeah.
Alfred E. Newman, the human.
Yeah.
But like he really kind of like has that vibe to him. He's a real like he's a chump in the 50s sense of the word.
Yes, because he's supposed to be. He's the guy that Joe's gonna kind of win Betty away from, because what we find out at this party after Artie introduces Joe as the Black Dahlia suspect, which is such a wild thing because like at this time that crime was like 3 years old.
Yeah, that's about 3 years out.
Oh yeah, we also learned that Artie's girlfriend is the Paramount reader Betty Schaefer.
Artie's girlfriend, not so into fidelity, it turns out.
Nope. She's definitely very easily swayed. She wants to talk to him about his bases loaded script. She is
basically unbuttoning his pants from the moment they see each other at this party.
They have this bizarre moment where they seem like they're acting out a romantic scene.
And so I think this is a little bit of... this is where you start to see that, like, while they're leaning into that kind of patter, where you like you see it a lot in Double Indemnity, where it's like, you know, the man says something, and the woman says something, and they're just sort of like sparring a little bit verbally, and there's so much sexual tension, but it's like we know from the outset that this woman is supposed to get married to his friend, Dragnet.
Yes,
and that doesn't seem to matter because the entire movie, all she wants to do is fuck Joe Gillis.
Yes.
That's all she's interested in. She's like, oh, I know Artie's in Arizona, but that's because Artie's in Arizona. Am I right, Joe? Like, Jesus Christ, woman.
I don't know. I think that it's the way that I eventually, and maybe it's just because I watched this so many fucking times this week, the way that this kind of relationship bears out to me is kind of lends to this idea that he just ruins shit. He's just a wrecking ball because he comes into everybody's life and all he does is just destroy shit.
But I feel like she's I don't know, maybe because
she's culpable for sure.
Oh, absolutely. They try to make this plot more significant than maybe it needs to be, but in doing that, they never build it up. And so they just kind of charge into it. It's like, I don't know, we don't have time to build this relationship out. So let's just do the whole Double Indemnity patter and get right to it. Because they go in like they don't know each other that well. And all of a sudden, she just wants to fuck him from the second they see each other. And it's like, damn.
It definitely seems like a piece of a script that was sort of written in bits and pieces. You know, like it's just... Without seeing the bigger picture, it feels like they're putting undue significance on a part that is just undercooked.
And so here's another sad story about this film. So when he goes to use the phone,
Yeah.
and there's
those two giggling girls.
Yes. So the one on the phone is Yvette Vickers. And she was in Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. She's in Attack of the Leeches. She had sort of a moderate career in the late 50s. She's like more drive-in-y kind of stuff. So Yvette Vickers died she had a career. She could have bought a house in the canyon somewhere. And she dies in 2010. But nobody had heard from her in a really long time. So in 2011, someone's like, I gotta go by and check on Yvette, see how she's doing.
No, I don't like where this is going.
She'd been dead for a year.
Holy shit, dude.
Like, that is some dark shit. Like, that's Hollywood, man.
Yeah, that's no good.
But anyway, I find this character a little obnoxious. Like, I feel like this is someone who doesn't know young women, and it's kind of like if John Carpenter had not asked Deborah Hill to write the young women in Halloween, this is what we would get, where he's just like, it's a gay party and she's trying to climb that ladder, and it's like, well, she's trying to do something, I'll tell you that much, because it's like your fucking boyfriend is in the other room and you are basically have your tongue down this man's throat.
Yep. Yeah, they have immediate chemistry, but he calls back to Norma's to have Max get all his stuff ready to move out. But Max informs us that Norma took one of Joe's razors and cut her wrist. So he rushes back to the mansion, back to her arms. So sometime later...
I mean, I guess the takeaway here is, if ladies want to get what they want, you just got to cut your arm.
Yeah, it's got to be manipulative.
That's what I do.
Yeah. So sometime later... Betty tries to call Joe at Norma's place, but Max tells her that he's not there. But he is, and they're chilling out in the pool. Max tells Norma that the phone call was just someone looking for a stray dog. Sick burn. So she sends Max to Paramount.
This is, again, where you get Max... you're more suspicious of him. Like, he's cast in a very interesting light because there is such an air of menace around these characters. And you're not quite sure, like, what's happening here. And again, eventually you understand why he's doing this. Uh-huh. But, like, he just seems like there's something very menacing about him.
Right. Well, that's the point, because he's the monstrous heavy at the
yes.
haunted manor, So, yeah, she sends Max to Paramount to give the Salome script to DeMille. So, out for the night, they're in that crazy Italian car. Norma needs more cigarettes, sends Joe into the pharmacy to pick some up. They stop at Schwab's. She hands him some money to pay for the cigarettes. Joe gives her a really nasty look, like the money represents something terrible, and it's accompanied on the soundtrack by a swanky saxophone sting.
But again, it's like, dude, you kind of walk, like, this is what you wanted, almost. And this is why I think the writing is a little bit clever, because... it does walk that line of, like, is he exploiting her, but did he expect this? Like, you do start to be like, oh, he's falling into this, and you feel a little bit bad.
He's in over his head almost immediately. Like, she is a force of nature that just takes over his life.
And I think in 1950, you would view that with a lot of sympathy and be like, oh, he's trapped by this woman.
Yes.
But to watch it now, it's like, no, bitch, you walked into this shit. You wanted this. That is why you did all of this.
But at the same time, maybe that's what he intended. But, and I mean, just because we're so used to sort of conventional movie narratives, we just assume that we're supposed to be on this guy's side. Because, like, at no point am I. Like, I don't find Joe Gillis to be that compelling of a character.
No, he's not. He's boring as shit.
I don't find him to be terribly sympathetic at all. Like, because you see him just step on rake after rake in this movie. So,
you know what I'm picturing.
Yes, yes. And I hope the listener does too. So Joe runs into Artie and Betty at the pharmacy. Betty, oh, man, that's awesome.
It's real good.
That's our sneakiest reference.
Just find a way to put that on Instagram.
So Betty wants to tell them that Sheldrake likes the idea that they worked out at the party, because that's what they did. I think we skipped past that. Was she grabs him because she there was this piece of his bases loaded script that she liked and wants to sort of extrapolate into a feature of its own. It has something to do with a teacher.
And I think this is a really important turning point in the story, because what she represents is that sort of like, so if Norma represents giving up and sort of surrendering to his frustration and cynicism, what Betty represents is that spark of genius, that spark of feeling alive.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I'm drawn to this. And so she's like, this is the real future. And this is where I think you start to get into a little bit of that misogyny, where it's like, oh, this young woman is the future, not this old fucking hag who's 50.
Yes, I can see. Yes, because that's the thing is, and it goes back to our sort of that thing we were talking about before, where like, she's the young woman. She's the opposite of this like old woman who lives in this haunted castle.
Right.
You know, like it's definitely that, because she becomes they have to have a romantic angle, but really what she represents is she is the sort of the purity of writing, because that's her whole thing. I just want to write, she keeps saying. And that's really all he wants to do. She
came to Hollywood to be a writer, and she's a script girl. Like, and essentially he's sort of a little bit older, so he's a little bit more jaded. And he's like, this kid, she doesn't really get it. She'll learn soon. And it's like, okay, fine, whatever. And it really, that actually does contribute to that feeling that he's a little bit jaded, he's frustrated by all of this. But you start to wonder, like, she feels so alive. She's excited by all of this. She wants to do this. She wants to write. And it's like, he is someone who ran into one failure. He hit a road bump and was like, well, fuck it, I guess I'm back to Ohio or live with this old hag. And it's really hard to have sympathy for someone like that. It was like, do you even want to be a writer? Because you hit one hard patch and you decide to fucking bail.
Yeah. Like, I wonder how many people actually do sort of see him as the hero of the story. Like, the same sort of way that, like...
I'm sure in 1950, everybody.
Probably everybody. But it's sort of like the way that, like, nowadays, every now and then, there will be some sort of a show that comes along, like the fucking Sopranos or Breaking Bad or Mad Men, where there is a core of viewers.
Do you want to connect the commonality between all of those, or no?
Yeah, I think our listeners are smart enough to sort of pick it up. But there is well, no, go for it.
It is frustrated, disgruntled white men.
Yeah. Yeah.
What it is.
But what I mean
but
is
it's also big babies is what it is.
Yeah, there's a core of viewership who watch it and go, Don Draper's the good guy here.
But that's why I'm saying earlier, I was saying it is very frustrating to watch it, because you can see there is something universal in that, and saying, like, I have felt that as a person who is a writer who writes for a thing that doesn't, I don't get a lot of attention for it. But like, you want to do something big, and you're sort of like always being subverted. And you're
I feel that every fucking day. Like I wanted to get into the movies, and I ended up working, in web development. And that's definitely, it's because it was the safe choice, but I am frustrated by it every day because it's the thing that I definitely don't feel like I was fucking put here to do, And
I think that's why watching this is a little bit hard, is because as much as I hate Joe Gillis, I think he's a shitty character and a shitty person, there is something universal that I recognize in myself and don't like.
Yeah.
And I don't think when people watch this in the 50s, they recognize it and didn't like it. I think they recognized it and thought, hey, yeah, I was trapped by a woman too.
I see what you're saying.
And that's why
I don't disagree.
It's a little bit hard to watch this guy constantly make shitty decisions and then be like, but I'm a victim. Like, fuck you, you're a victim. Shut up.
Yeah.
Because all he does throughout this whole movie is whine about shit. It's like, oh, you're upset because this older woman is handing you shit? And also, their relationship actually doesn't seem bad. Like, yeah, she's a little bit weird, a little bit wacky, and she's very histrionic and dramatic, which I think is probably played up. I mean, yes, there are people who were like that and who are like that, but like, she is manipulative. But like, there are moments between them of tenderness, of vulnerability, of real relationship. And it's like, you're choosing to be here for this.
Yeah.
And yet at no point does it seem like he's making this choice. rather than you could go be able to. Obviously, this other lady wants to fuck you. She's been trying since she met you at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, you could make a decision, and you are. You're just making this decision, but nobody in the movie wants to acknowledge that he's actually making a decision.
Yeah,
he's the victim of the story, and he has been since the moment he's found dead in the pool.
Yeah, this is the thing. This is the part of the movie where I like. This is the part where I really find myself liking and kind of drawn towards Norma. She sees like a glimmer of hope in him. Like she sees in him what he sees in Betty,
right?
And it kind of brings her to life in a weird way. And it's going to kind of reach a crescendo pretty soon. And
a crescendo that I think doesn't make a lot of sense, but.
No, but
yeah, she is a very likable character because as much as she is dramatic and histrionic, she's very charismatic.
Yeah.
You know, when she's doing these this bathing beauty routine for him, and she's just sort of being very playful in a way that is sort of like, oh, you're kind of fun. Like, yeah, you're super dramatic and you're really over the top and you're a lot, but like your life's not boring. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But back to the movie. What ends up happening is Sheldrake wants a treatment for this idea that Betty's got. She's got notes, but she needs Joe to write it with her because it's kind of his idea. He lets her know that he's out of the writing game, and he leaves without the cigarettes. So now, what we just talked about, kept in the house, Norma entertains Joe with reenactments of her old movies and a Charlie Chaplin tramp impression. It's pretty good.
Yeah, she does a good one. Apparently, she used to do that like for real. Like
That's
that was
funny.
part of her routine.
Yeah. So Joe is a million miles away, thinking about how he wants that writing gig with Betty. And then Max comes in to inform her that Paramount has been calling her repeatedly.
Oh dear.
Yeah, and she immediately assumes that it's about the script. And I mean, why wouldn't she? So the next day they drive over to Paramount. Nobody there but the studio old-timers recognize her, and man, they love her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they drive up to stage 18, where Cecil B. DeMille, the actual Cecil B. DeMille, is directing his latest biblical epic, Samson and Delilah.
Look, I'm going to say Cecil B. DeMille, not a bad actor.
Not really, no. He's quite good. He's been paying attention.
A nice touch in this moment is that he refers to her as young fellow.
Yes.
Which is a very strange touch. That is what he used to call her when they worked together.
That's so great. So, yeah. So ironically, Samson and Delilah ends up beating out Sunset Boulevard for a bunch of Oscars in 51.
Oh, man. Biblical epics. Fuck off.
So inside, DeMille seems confused as to why Norma would be there, but at least seems sympathetic when the first AD suggests that he tell her to fuck off. That won't be the last.
He does it in an interesting way, though, because the AD is sort of like, this old hag, what's she fucking doing here? And he's just like, excuse me, young man.
Yeah.
And he sort of, he goes, he has this little bit short monologue about how, she was a big actor and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, also you're about 30 years older than she is. And nobody seems to be applying that logic to you, Cecil B. DeMille.
Yeah.
And we never really acknowledge that. There's a double standard here, obviously, not surprisingly either. But like, it is, I think the way DeMille treats her in this movie is very sympathetic and is everybody feels bad, I think, about what happened.
Yes.
And I don't see him as a bad guy. I think he's very complicit in a lot of things, and he's sort of like, he could have done anything. And he sort of chooses to play the studio game.
To me, it's how this scene ends, because he's very welcoming and he's very warm, and he sort of like allows her to come in and puts her in his director's chair and sort of lets her have this sort of moment until he doesn't. Because what ends up happening is also she's wearing a veil again, which is another sort of symbolic thing, because she's constantly going on about this whole Salome thing. But that's something to sort of keep in mind is when the last veil comes off, she gets John the Baptist's head, and Joe is being the stand-in for that. But she informs him that she's at the studio because she's been receiving calls from someone there named Gordon Cole. And now Gordon Cole was a real dude at Paramount. He was the senior prop master.
Oh, yeah. Even the people who aren't in the movie, there are name drops left and right. And some of those people were pissed.
But yeah, because they didn't get paid.
I think Greta Garbo sued them.
Oh, God.
Or no, Olivia de Havilland sued them.
Huh.
But
she was an angry woman who sued a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, so this Gordon Cole was the real senior prop master over there at Paramount. But also, David Lynch's character in Twin Peaks is named for this character. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, DeMille has her take a seat, a chair, and then the boom mic drifts over her head, which she like swats away.
Which is a great kind of like allegory.
It's a great metaphor because it is this thing that looms over her entire life now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so as she's chilling, one of the old-timer grips on the catwalk recognizes her, a guy named Hog Eye, who apparently was a real dude at Paramount. He was one of the real grips. And so he turns one of the lights on her, which draws the attention of all the other sort of like old-timers on the set. And they all like flock to her. And so she has this moment where like she realizes that people like fucking remember her and they really do love her. Like it's been 20 something years since she's been seen in public and not one of these people has forgotten about her. But then we find out that Gordon Cole wants the car and not her. That's what he's been calling about. He wants,
which feels like a little bit of a stretch. Like, hey, we saw your car rolling around town.
yeah. But But anyways, DeMille comes over, kind of tells everybody to get back to work, takes the light off of her, sort of robbing her of her moment, and then he brushes her off with.
So that's not the way I see it. I think he sees it as stop feeding into this fantasy.
Maybe, but then he immediately
works.
does that as he turns into it and just sort of lets her kind of believe with vague assurances that they're really going to make this movie together.
I think that's what it is. It's like he doesn't want to have to be confrontational. He doesn't want to hurt her, so he's just like stop feeding her fantasy, and then he's just like, no, let's usher you out gently, so none of us have to acknowledge what's happened. None of us have to acknowledge that the system has left you behind.
Yeah.
But that also doesn't fit with the rest of the story because again, she withdrew. She was not kicked out.
Yeah.
And then she built this fantasy up around her, so it doesn't really hold together. I think it maybe was just written in a way to portray him in a favorable light.
Maybe because he had to be paid a tremendous amount of money.
He was paid $10,000 for 1 day of work.
Yeah,
and then they had to do reshoots, and they gave him a car because he demanded another 10. They gave him a car and $3,000.
Yeah. But also while waiting, Joe spots Betty, and he runs up to her office in the reader's department, tells her that she can have the whole idea, and then he gives her a great story idea before he leaves, and the takeaway here is that they just have great chemistry. Now, back at the car, Max grimly informs Joe of Paramount's reason for calling. And then
this part is so hard.
Heartbreaking, because then when after DeMille sort of like ushers her out and sees her away, he turns to the AD and he's like, just get us another car. I don't have to fucking deal with this lady ever again.
Yeah, there's something weird about the DeMille part that doesn't quite fit. Like it just, how would he know all of this? Why would he know all this? Because like the impression we're given is that she has had no contact with the studios.
True.
So how would he know any of this? And she's sort of caught up in this fantasy and living out this fantasy life.
Unless he just sort of intuits it from the moment that she steps on. Because she does come in.
She's pretty wacky.
She just come in and she's like, oh, it's going to be so great working together. And I can't wait to make a movie with you again. And it's going to be just like the old times. And like maybe it's just like a sort of deficiency in the way that he portrays it. But like he may have at some point have sort of just been like, oh shit, she thinks we're going to do something together by coming here. So then Norma undergoes a battery of ridiculous skin and facial treatments to trim down and look young for the movie that's never going to be made.
So apparently Charles Brackett hated this scene.
Yes, it led to a falling out. Now apparently Brackett and Wilder fought violently whenever they worked together, but they produced,
which is
really
amazing because they wrote like 12 movies.
Yeah, this is their 9th movie together. It's also their last movie together. They never work again after.
And I think because I get the impression that Charles Brackett didn't like what Billy Wilder was doing.
I think that Wilder had a tendency to go off on these kind of like wild flights of fancy, while Brackett was the guy who kept drawing things down and keeping him a little bit more pinned to the earth.
Yes. And so what Charles Brockett hated was that this scene is too revealing. And I wonder, because I think this is the moment where you recognize, like, this is not about beauty. That none of this was ever really about the fact that she looks old, because she doesn't look old.
No.
And this is when he reveals, like, you're 50 years old. And I think the way people have watched it since that, like, we're supposed to recoil in horror, I don't think that's the intention. I think you're supposed to be like, oh, she's 50?
Yeah.
Like, that's not old. And I don't think you're supposed to think that's old. I think the reality is like, oh, she's not old.
Well, because when he walks out at the end, that's what he says to her. He's like, "You're just 50." There's like, and the implication here is there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. Like, this is not about the way you look. This is about the way you are.
Yeah.
This is about you wanting to play a 22-year-old character in a movie when you're 50. It's not that you will look old. It's that you refuse to be the age that you are and be the person that you are. There could have been a role for her in lots of Hollywood things.
Yeah.
She just refused to participate in a realistic way.
Yeah. So during a break, she confronts Joe about where he's been going at night. Joe lies, of course. We're about to see where he's been going. So he takes the car down to Paramount to write the movie together with Betty by night. Their relationship grows stronger. She's still devoted to Joe, but there's a strain there. She's still devoted to Artie, but there's a strain there. She spots Joe's cigarette case.
There's a strain there. She is basically ripping this guy's clothes off. Like, I don't understand this character. It is not just flirtation.
It's
more than flirtation.
It's very strong.
It is aggressive, and she is the one pursuing it aggressively.
Right, because he does pull away several times, including in this scene.
Which is, it's not the pursuing part that I'm upset with. It's the fact that they just keep being like, oh, but you're engaged to Artie. And she's like, yeah, Artie, what a great guy. Hey, wanna fuck? Like, it's just like, why are we acting like she's not engaged? Like, what is the deal with this?
Yeah, sometimes it do be like that. But
and again, I'm not even judging that. I just think it's weird that at no point is anybody like, oh, but I'm engaged. Oh, but what about Artie? They're basically just like, yeah, Artie's a great guy. Remember the time we kissed each other? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, she spots Joe's cigarette case with Norma's engraving and asks about it, but Joe deflects and he lies his way out of giving up the truth. So then, by night, they take a walk around the lot, around the exterior sets. Betty tells a story about growing up right near the studio, how she grew up on the lot because her father was an electrician there. And this is actually a story about Wilder's wife, except that it was her mother who worked in the wardrobe department.
Yep.
Yeah, I like a little biographical detail in there.
I also like just watching them walk around the lot because the lot feels so familiar.
Yes, it's like a Western, I think.
Yeah,
and it was a real set. Like they were. Yeah.
I mean, I think you can still go to the Universal lot, right? It's part of Universal Studios in California.
I believe that it's all theme park now.
What a shame.
Yeah, but I believe Paramount is still there. It's like the last of the studios that's actually in Hollywood.
Like, it's just, I find it so fascinating that it's like, these are basically just big cities that they just created these giant empty lots.
Yeah, and like Paramount actually outgrew its own like sort of footprint.
Yep.
Until Desilu shuttered, because that was directly right next to them, and then they bought up the Desilu sets and buildings and sort of expanded into there.
That's like 59, 60, 62, something like that.
Yes.
It's like a couple of years after they get divorced.
Yeah, and it's still right there. Like I believe Paramount backs up right up against the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. So yeah, it's still there. I think WB is up in like Burbank or something like that. But yeah, most of them are long gone. So Betty and Joe nearly kiss, but he breaks it off, warns her to stop him if he ever gets too close to her.
Or he can stop himself too.
That's true. You got to exercise a little self-control there.
Yeah. You're not the victim here, Joe.
For once in your life. So when he gets back to Norma's, he finds Max waiting for him in the gloom of the garage. Joe cops to working on the script with Betty, but Max steals the show with a terrible confession.
Joe is aware of the damage that he's doing to Norma with all the lies, and it's eating him alive. Max, however, commits a far worse crime. Max, you see, was her director and her first husband, and when they split, it all kind of came apart for her.
Her first husband, whose bedroom Joe has been sleeping in.
Yes. So he continues on as her manservant, just hopelessly in love with a woman who could never truly love him back. But he just continues to shield her from the worst of her career spiral, which explains why she's such a fucking disaster. So everything that he's done, he has created this fantasy for her, and she just goes along with it because it's just sort of a continuance of her career as a movie star. At least as closely as an approximation as he can provide with her. But apparently it's enough for her. And he has just been feeding this delusion for like 20 years.
But I think the difference between the two of them is that Joe is doing it for personal gain, whereas Max genuinely believes that she is a star. She is the star.
Yes.
And she deserves all of these things. And so rather than watch her fade or watch her be disappointed, he decides to contribute and like lean into basically creating this fantasy with her and sort of safeguarding and building this whole world around her so she never has to face reality.
Yeah.
Now, both are equally unhealthy and terrible, but what doesn't work about that anymore is like it removes any agency that she has. And I think this is where the movie starts to fall apart a little bit, is she goes from being like slightly deluded, a little bit kooky, to being off the fucking rails out of nowhere.
Yeah, she does. She cracks very suddenly, and we're getting close to that moment. But he's going to do this right up to the last moment in a way that's it's sick and fucked up, but it's a little sweet. Because there is an altruism to his motivations.
Or I don't know if there's an altruism. I don't think there is. There's something weird and selfish about what he's doing, but he's doing it out of a misguided feeling of love. Like he is obsessed with her. He is so invested in her as a star that he cannot watch her crumble.
Yeah. So
But
this is a movie.
Something about it that it is about him as well.
This is a movie about selfish people, I guess. At its core, everybody is just out for themselves,
except for Norma, because she's a little bit deluded, and she is just no one is allowing her to face the world.
Yeah, true. She's self-centered, but she's always been that way.
Right.
Yeah. So,
and if these people hadn't been there to like build up this wall around her, she would have had to, because there is evidence that she does. I mean, her wardrobe is very modern. She does have to go out into the real world.
Yes.
She just quickly retreats into the house where everything is safe and normal. If she couldn't do that, she would have to live in the real world.
Yeah. So with Joe asleep, Norma wanders into his room and finds the script pages in his jacket. It's a movie called Untitled Love Story with Betty and Joe's name on it. So later that night, while writing with Betty again, we learn that she's fully in love with Joe now. But Artie has telegrammed for her. He wants her to come out to Arizona to the set he's working on, but she's just not feeling it anymore.
I wish someone would telegram for me. No one's ever telegrammed for me.
Yeah. Dave, stop. Come to Arizona. Stop.
The answer is a hard no.
Fuck Arizona. She's in love with Joe, and they kiss. So now,
because of course they do.
Yeah. So Joe goes back to Norma's, and he's flying high on this new love. He's won Betty. The dude is a wrecking ball, just pure force of destruction. He's actively damaging Norma and is about to destroy Betty's relationship with Artie.
And this is why I wonder, how was this received in 1950? Because at this point, it's like, dude, you were making every bad decision.
Yes. Yeah.
And yet it seems like the turn towards, again, her King Lear madness is like almost as if to justify or to distract from all of his bad decisions that have led to this.
Yes. So Norma, meanwhile, has called Betty at her boarding house to sow discord with her, basically tells her that he's a gigolo. And Joe grabs the phone, tells her to come out and see what sort of life he leads there. And Norma falls to pieces before him, begging for some kind of reaction from him, anything but the hate he feels for her now. So Betty drives over with a friend. Joe greets her, coldly showcasing this luxurious life that he has reduced himself to. He confesses all of it to her, pushing her away. He's harsh, but you can tell that he's pushing her away because he hates himself
And being with him will only lead to ruin for her.
But again, I fucking hate this part because it's like he's still making himself the victim in all of this.
Yeah, there is a kind of woe is me.
Yeah.
Kind of
like you did not need to call her over. You could just say no. Yeah. You don't have to call her over and draw her into your weird bullshit in which you're the sad, tragic victim. Like, motherfucker, you walked into this. You chose to do all this one step after another. You keep choosing to do this as though he has no other choice. He has a million other fucking choices. Yeah. He just doesn't want to choose any of them because that would require something of him.
Yeah. Yeah. So also, he has a really great line here that explains the whole thing. That she's an older woman who's well-to-do, and he's a younger man who's not doing too well.
Which it is great writing, but again, it's that shucks, this old Joe can't catch a break. And it's like, yeah, you can. You've got this woman right here who wants to write a fucking movie with you. You just can't keep your fucking hands off of her.
Yeah.
He's making himself the victim. And I don't think that's the way the story is intended to portray him, but that is what he's doing. Every single thing. He's like, no, rather than just say, hey, I don't think I can do this. This feeling between us is weird. I don't like the way this is going. He has to be like, no, I'm going to destroy this once and for all. I'm going to show you what a bad person I am. It's like, fuck you, you big baby.
Yeah. He shows her out.
Just say no. Just say no, thank you.
He shows her out to the swell of the orchestra. And I despite the fact that he is just a fucking big baby the whole time, this is a real kind of heartbreaking moment. But also,
it is, but it's like, you didn't have to bring her over here to break her heart in front of you. Like, just say no.
Yeah, but like also the camera as she's leaving, the camera sort of pans up and Norma is up there, sort of like on the upper level, like still like lording over him.
These fucking stairs are incredible.
Amazing.
I want a house that has stairs like that. Would I be able to furnish it? Absolutely not. It would just be me and the stairs. But it doesn't matter.
You know what you do is you become a gigolo to a fading actress
to
in
an
Hollywood.
older woman.
So Joe returns to his room. Ignoring Norma's thanks. Before she goes in to face him, she stops and checks her makeup in a nearby mirror, and it's a hell of a shot because she's looking at herself, but the reflection is looking directly at us.
Yeah.
So when she enters his room, she finds him packing, strips off all the extravagant gifts that she's given him. He tells her that he's given up and he's heading back to Ohio. And Norma fully melts down here, and her collapse is terrible and is shot in real stark close-ups.
And what she's doing is she's basically like, look, I told you I got a gun, and she, has the gun and she produces it. And what is so wild about this is like, in the last, I don't know how many months, I've been writing a lot of stories about like society, like high society murders. And as melodramatic as this moment is, it has happened so many times where like a woman kills a man because he's leaving her. And it's like, it seems crazy, but it happens a lot.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole crime of passion thing that cops used to fall back on so much.
And especially in Hollywood, like again, with the suicides, it's like in Hollywood at the time, everybody was just so caught up in this weird big fantasy that like even this shit, even shooting someone just didn't feel real. Like at a certain point, it was just like, well, I guess end scene kind of thing. Like, nope.
Yep. So she presents a gun, and the way she holds it is very strange. Like she holds it with both hands, like she's presenting it on a platter, like she doesn't know how to hold it. And so, but the show is completely over. Joe tells her about Max's games to keep the illusion up, but she's not hearing it. Joe also reassures her that there's nothing old about 50, which is more or less Wilder's central conceit here. That's what you were talking about a little while ago.
But also not. Like, while this is what he is saying, at the same time, he's portraying her as something other or sort of monstrous in a weird way. And I don't know if that's entirely because of her behavior. I think there is something about her age and her appearance that, because she gets this kind of rictus grin at this point and just becomes wild.
Yeah.
This is where she loses all sense of reality.
Yeah, like to me, this is the sort of It's a single line that he's kind of using to browbeat like all of Hollywood with, because this is kind of its worst character, one of its worst characteristics.
Yes, this is a very confrontational movie, and this is the most confrontational moment in the movie.
Yeah. So
it's very much like look and see what you've done kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. So this is one of the parts that kind of made these studio heads go out of their fucking minds. Yeah, and also one of the reasons why they didn't submit the script in full to the studio, because like if anybody had ever really sort of seen the full scope of what they were trying to make with this movie, like Paramount would have just insisted on either a different movie entirely or just this would have been shut down. But Joe grabs his bag and he leaves. Norma chases him out to the lawn with a gun. She shoots Joe in the back twice.
What's great about this moment is that he doesn't even turn around. He just keeps walking.
And then after the second shot, he turns and she shoots him again in the stomach. And that's when he falls into the pool and he's dead.
And I think, part of it is probably like they may have misjudged how far the pool was.
Oh, yes, because he has to stagger quite a bit. It should have been very dramatic,
but he has to kind of make his way there. But it works in that moment where he keeps walking is that sort of like, no, I'm leaving. Yeah. I don't care what you do.
Yeah.
Even if he shoots her, he's still leaving.
Yeah.
And as much as I think that moment is really great, I still am just like, I don't fucking care what happens to you, you fucking baby. Come fall in the pool. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah. So now we cut back to the present as the police fish Joe's body out of the pool, and he continues to narrate in spite of being dead. And so now the press has arrived. The police try to call the morgue, but find the line occupied. Up in Norma's room, we find real-life Hollywood gossip columnist Hedda Hopper taking over narration for Joe.
Also doing a great job. She's really selling it too.
Before she was a gossip columnist, she was an actress.
Was she really?
Yep.
I just know her from the one episode of I Love Lucy. Yeah. Listen, everybody, my cultural references for Hollywood, they all begin with I Love Lucy.
Me too, really. So she takes over the narration for Joe as the cops kind of escort Norma out to be arrested. She's made up in a really gaudy costume now as Salome. While the cops...
And again, we get this moment of the stairs. And I think when she descends the stairs with the gun initially, that I think is very reminiscent of the moment at the end of Dracula on the stairs when he pushes Renfield off of the thing. It's that long shot of the stairway and this big dramatic kind of descending the staircase.
Yeah.
And she does that, and she will do it again in this moment too.
Yeah. And that's got to be a thing for directors when they see a staircase there like that. They're just like, oh, fuck yes.
Like, we're doing it.
We're doing it.
Get up there.
Yeah. So the cops are trying to question her. They're not getting through to her. She's a million miles away. They do get her attention when she hears the cops say that the news cameras are here. And so now they lead her down the steps, and Max takes up with the camera crews, directing one of Hollywood's most iconic scenes.
Iconic and misquoted scenes.
Yes. So with all the veils removed, John the Baptist is now without his head. Norma symbolically stripped bare. She finally gets what she wants, an audience. And at the bottom of the steps, she gives a speech to the police and the news people as a surrogate for Wilder. She loves making movies, and despite her insanity in this moment, it's one of the only genuine and honest things that she says in the entire movie. Then she quietly speaks one of the most quotable lines of all time. All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up. And then she approaches the camera slowly with an insane look on her face and her hand.
Yeah, real Susan Tyrrell energy.
Yes, her hand twisted into a claw.
Yep.
We blur out, roll credits. Wilder denies her the close-up.
And I kind of hate this ending. I love it in how grandiose it is. But I hate the way it goes from like 0 to 60 in a very short amount of time. Like, oh, we got to wrap this shit up.
Yeah. Because he does. This movie it's not quite 2 hours, but about the point where he's like, fuck it, I'm leaving. And she kind of cracks. It does start to feel a little long in the tooth.
But like then she shoots him. And I think I'm with her until she shoots him. And then she just goes full blown crazy. And it's like, wait a minute. Like...
Yeah.
She's always been a little off and because she's sort of cloistered away and sad, but she's not nuts. And this part portrays her as though like, oh, now she's just out of her tree completely. And I don't much like that part because she is a very relatable character in a lot of ways. She's a very sad person, a very desperate person. but she's still like, you get it, you understand why. And then all of a sudden, oh no, she's just nuts.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like way to kind of like undermine your whole story and reduce this complicated character to something really like efficient and useful.
Yeah. I can see that. I still, as a whole, I think that this movie is absolutely fucking brilliant.
I think it's an incredible movie. It's not among my favorites, especially of his, but I think there's so much going on there.
Yeah.
What I do wonder now, because, if we're talking about in terms of a cult film, because I don't think this is a horror movie. I think there's noirish elements and there's aesthetically there are gothic aspects to it.
Yeah.
That they're going for a very particular reason. And I think it's very smart to do so. So I get why people make that association. I don't think it's a horror movie. In terms of why it's a cult film, I think there's a lot of really timeless themes. I mean, we've talked about over the last 2 and however many hours, talked about how it still resonates and how we still see pieces of ourselves in Norma or in Joe or in all these characters, because it is about ambition and it's about relevance and that fear that you will become irrelevant and that your ambition will never be realized. And so I think those are really those are timeless elements and that it will always resonate with an audience. Beyond that, though, I think there's a lot of things that just don't read anymore, or that just don't age well. Like the fact that like she's a hysterical woman.
Yeah.
And that Joe's a sympathetic guy who's down on his luck. It's like, no, he's a sympathetic guy who won't fucking try hard.
Right. Or at least he should have given up long ago. Like if this wasn't working, then just...
Or if you don't want it, then get the fuck out of the way. Like if you're not willing to actually put in the effort, then get out of the way.
Because that's really where he begins. Is he's shoveling out like garbage that he thinks is going to sell. He's already at the point where he really should have thrown in the towel. Like
right.
And
then when he's presented with someone who wants to work with him on this great story, he's just kind of like, oh, no, baby, I can't do it. Let me show you why. And because I really want to drive the point home, I'm going to show you. I'm going to call you out here so you can witness this tragedy and feel bad for me. It's like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Go back to Ohio, you fucking loser.
No. But yeah, like, I mean, Sarah, broken down into these bits and pieces, it really does. It's got its weaknesses that I'm willing to overlook because the sort of grander picture is like just that, like a representation of the Hollywood that like of that old sort of Hollywood that I love. Beautiful movie. I'm glad that we spent like 2.5 hours like really breaking it down because it's a fucking awesome movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I mean, I can't think of much that ages quite in the same way. Like there's a lot that doesn't work anymore, but it's so much that you're willing to overlook it because the larger themes are still so relevant. Yeah.
I mean, Hollywood is a disastrous fucking, destroyer of lives. It's a monstrous. It's a creature. It's a terrible, terrible monster, really.
I mean, that's the wild thing is like, I think what we've seen in the last year or two makes this feel even more relevant now.
Yeah. The more things change, the more they stay the same. It's it's no good. It's a terrible, terrible thing that somehow produces, wonderful things. It's just the...
Yeah, by having a fucking stranglehold over anything that threatens it.
Essentially. It's sad.
It's basically a hostage taker.
I've got Stockholm syndrome with these fucking movie studios.
Yep.
So, there it is, Sunset Boulevard, man. It's a fucking hell of a movie. What are we doing next?
Well, in all of my zest for this, I forgot to write it down. Is it what I think it is?
Yes, it is. It is a big one, baby. It is a big one. We're doing The Warriors.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite movies ever.
Yep. Super good.
Yeah. So, hey, be back here in a week when we do Cronenberg. We'll look at The Brood. Be back here in 2 when we do another fucking, probably going to be a long one on The Warriors. Goddamn.
Awesome.